Chapter 1981. Yes, this servant will do it right away. Chun Kuei's face showed joy as she immediately got up from the ground and said. Xiao Hua's heart moved as he cupped his hands and said, Villa Master, since this face retaining grass is already dead, can you give it to this junior? This junior also wants to see what the poisonous saliva is. This. Chun Yi was somewhat hesitant as she glanced at Elder Mu. Elder Mu slightly nodded, indicating that the face retaining grass had already lost its vitality. Even if Xiao Hua took it, it would be useless. And it's rare for you to have such thoughts. How can this old one not satisfy you? Chun Yi waved her hand and said with a smile, Chun Kuei, give the face retaining grass to Xiao Hua. Yes. Chun Kuei knew what Chun Yi was thinking. She took out the beauty retaining grass from the yellow soil and didn't give it to Xiao Hua. Instead, with a wave of her hand, she cut off the part that wasn't in the soil and gave it to Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua saw that Chun Yi was so vigilant, he bitterly smiled as he took it and put it into his space. All of you leave. Chun Yi's divine sense swept through the medicine garden as she coldly ordered. Yes, everyone didn't dare to be negligent as they all retreated from the medicine garden. Xiao Hua stood in front of the bamboo forest as he watched the bamboo in the bamboo forest continuously change. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth also changed a lot along with the movement of the formation. However, Xiao Hua currently had a deep understanding of formations. Just from the changes of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, he could already faintly perceive the power of the formation and some traces of it. After a meal, Chun Yi came out of the bamboo forest. Her face had already recovered the innocence that Xiao Hua had when he first saw her, and even a little shy. Let's go. If I'm not wrong, if Sun Qian comes to Mu Jing Garden again, she will definitely be discovered by me, hee. Chun Yi said as she waved her hand. Xiao Hua, you also come. Yes. Xiao Hua didn't dare to disobey and followed Chun Yi and the others to Linlang Pavilion. Come, Xiao Hua. Chun Yi waved her hand and said, This time, you were able to save my buried flower villa's face retaining grass. So, I can't not toast you 3 times. As she spoke, Chun Kuei and Dong Jin also took out 3 fist-sized jade cups and said with a smile, Fellow Daoist Xiao, this matter is all thanks to you. Let me toast you 3 times on behalf of the Villa Master. Xiao Hua extended his hand to receive it, then bowed towards Chun. Many thank for Manor Lord's generous gift. This junior was also taking a risk, but I was actually breaking out in a cold sweat earlier. Hee. Chun Yi smiled faintly. She looked very pure and lovely, far less terrifying than when she was angry earlier. After Xiao Hua finished drinking the 3 cups of spirit wine, which was quite different from the Snow Jean spirit wine from before, Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, It must be because the heavens have taken care of Manor Lord's usual benevolence. Knowing that something would happen in the manor today, this junior was specially sent here. Hee, you really know how to talk. Chun Yi covered her mouth with her hand and laughed. Since the youth retaining grass is fine, it can be considered that Junior's grievance has been washed away. Xiao Hua continued. Junior still has some matters to attend to. When I have the whereabouts of the heavenly Ying grass, please send me a message. Don't worry about the heavenly Ying grass. I will definitely keep an eye out for you, Chun Yi said with a smile. However, that protective magic treasure of yours. Speaking of which, I don't really like it. Oh, didn't senior previously? Xiao Hua was somewhat flabbergasted. He didn't know why Chun Yi went back on her words. Hee, I suddenly want to make a deal with you, Chun Yi said with a smile. Xiao Hua frowned, and a bad feeling emerged from the bottom of his heart. Sure enough, Chun Yi quickly uncovered the mystery. Your secret technique of fighting poison with poison is pretty good. I feel that it's more suitable than any protective magic treasure. You might as well use that secret technique to exchange for the heavenly Ying grass. Xiao Hua thought for a moment, then nodded and said, Okay, as long as senior can find the heavenly Ying grass, this junior can use this secret technique to exchange with senior. Hee, I want to get the jade slip of the secret technique right now, Chun Yi said with a smile. or you can stay in my burial flower manor and wait for me to find the heavenly grass. Otherwise, without this secret technique, I don't have any confidence. Xiaohua was really in a difficult position. Firstly, he was somewhat afraid of this female cultivator whose mood was fickle and unpredictable. Secondly, this female cultivator seemed to be somewhat greedy. He had a lot of secrets, and this secret technique of fighting poison with poison was nothing. If she discovered something, it was very likely that he wouldn't be able to leave Burial Flower Manor. However, if he were to take out the secret technique for nothing, it would make Xiao Hua's heart ache. Moreover, Chen Yi didn't have full confidence in getting the heavenly grass. If she couldn't get the heavenly grass in the future, how could he get back the value of the secret technique? Forget it. After pondering for a moment, Xiao Hua sighed cautiously. Lord Manor is a golden core stage senior, so this junior definitely believes in you. This secret technique, junior will give it to senior in advance. I hope senior can gather the heavenly grass as much as possible. As Xiao Hua expected, Chun Yi beamed with joy and waved her hand. Look at what you're saying. Why would a golden core stage cultivator like me care about your secret technique? How about this? You can stay in my burial flower manor for the time being. When I find the heavenly grass, I'll trade with you. There's no need. Xiao Hua hurriedly and sincerely said. This junior sincerely wants to give this secret technique to senior. If I didn't give this secret technique to senior in advance, I'm afraid senior won't do your best. Nonsense. Chen Yi's small nose slightly wrinkled, and she scolded with a smile. Just based on that jade slip of yours, I won't do my best. At this moment, Chun Yi frowned slightly, and her eyes slightly raised, looking to the right of Xiao Hua. Huh? Could it be? Xiao Hua was shocked, thinking that Sun Qian, who Chen Yi mentioned, had appeared in Glittering Jewels Pavilion. However, soon after, a gust of wind blew past, as if Chun Yi had used some secret technique, and the surrounding spiritual chi of heaven and earth gathered. Invite fellow Taoist Zhu in, Chun Yi said softly. Soon after, Chun Yi waved her hand, and a brilliance flew out from her sleeve, dispersing the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. She smiled at Xiao Hua and said, Your luck has come. What do you mean? Xiao Hua didn't understand, but he had a premonition in his heart. Fellow Taoist Zhu Qinghe of Meng Country's Su Yin faction is also one of the participants of this operation. He suddenly came to my burial flower manor this time, and I'm afraid it's related to this operation. Chun Yi explained with a smile. You can leave first. Don't be in a hurry to leave. Wait for me to welcome fellow Taoist Zhu, and see if it's time for the operation. If so, you can leave after I get the heavenly grass. Ayo, that's great. Thank you, senior. Xiao Hua was overjoyed, and he bowed to thank her. You're welcome, Chun Yi said with a wave of her sleeve. However, just as Xiao Hua was about to leave Glittering Jewels Pavilion, Chun Yi shouted, Xiao Hua, oh, are leaving just like that? Oh, Xiao Hua was stunned, and then he smiled bitterly in his heart. This Chun, where does she have the bearing of a Golden Core Realm senior? The heavenly grass. I'm afraid it's hard to count on it. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote. Chapter 1982. Soon after, Xiao Hua pretended to come to a sudden realization as he slapped his forehead and said, Look at this junior's memory. I was just thinking about taking out the jade slip, but I was immediately overjoyed when I heard the good news. I've embarrassed myself in front of senior. Then he took out a jade slip, recorded the secret technique, and handed it to Chun Yi. Chun Yi's divine sense swept over and nodded. Not bad. I appreciate your kind intentions. After he finished speaking, he no longer paid any attention to Xiao Hua. He stood up and walked away. Presumably, he was going to welcome Su Yin faction's Zhu Qinghe. Fellow Taoist Xiao, please follow me. Seeing that Xiao Hua was somewhat in a daze, Chun Kuei reminded him. Many thanks, fellow Taoist. Xiao Hua laughed bitterly. In front of a core formation cultivator, how could initial stage foundation establishment possibly be taken seriously? In the future, Unless I have no other choice, I will never trade with any golden core or nascent soul cultivators again. Xiaohua secretly made up his mind. This is simply asking a tiger for its skin. If I'm not careful, my life will be taken. Soon after, Xiaohua followed Chun Kuei out of the Linlang Pavilion and returned to the pavilion where he previously sat in meditation. At this time, the two female cultivators who were originally guarding the pavilion had either not returned or were no longer guarding him. They were no longer beside the pavilion. Xiaohua pushed open the door and entered. Just as he was about to close the door, he heard Chun Kuei say in a low voice behind him, "This concubine thanks fellow Taoist Xiao for saving my life today." Oh! Xiaohua turned his head to take a look. Chun Kuei was standing there with a bow. He smiled and waved his hand. "Fellow Taoist Chun Kuei, I was just trying to protect myself. It can't be considered as special assistance. You don't have to take it to heart. Fellow Taoist Xiao, you may think so, but I wouldn't dare." Although Spring Kuei stood up, she still said respectfully, "If it weren't for Dao Friend's help, the lives of over 100 servants of the buried Flower Manor's Spring Division would have been lost." Hee. That's because the Manor Lord was angry. He wouldn't be so heartless. Xiaohua laughed. Spring Kuei didn't comment. After thinking for a while, she patted her hand and took out a few spiritual herbs from her storage bag. She smiled apologetically and said, "I don't have anything good, but these are the spiritual herbs unique to my burial Flower Manor. Please accept them, fellow cultivator Xiao." "No need." Xiaohua waved his hand. "If the Manor Lord were to find out about these things, I'm afraid it wouldn't be good. It doesn't matter. This was obtained by this concubine. It can't be considered as something particularly precious." Chun Kuei insisted on giving it to Xiaohua. Xiaohua rolled his eyes and said, "If fellow Taoist has the heart to thank me, then pick up the abandoned spirit grass seeds of Burial Flower Manor, or the withered seeds that won't germinate, and give them to me. In short, Burial Flower Manor can treat them as trash." Spring Sunflower was stunned. She didn't know how to withdraw her outstretched hand. She asked in surprise, "What does fellow Taoist Xiao want those useless things for? My Burial Flower Manor casually discards those things." That's good. Xiaohua says with a smile. "This Xiao likes to collect rare things. Even if it's a dead spirit grass, it's still good." "I understand," Spring Sunflower said with a smile. "Fellow Taoist Xiao, you wanted the beauty-retaining grass to be poisoned to death, right?" "Yes." Xiaohua nods and says with a smile, "That's right. Although this Xiao didn't obtain the real beauty-retaining grass, the poison beauty-retaining grass is still beauty-retaining grass after all. This Xiao not only broadens his knowledge, but also can show off." "What's wrong with that?" "All right, those things are easy." This concubine originally thought that fellow Taoist Xiao wanted to refuse this concubine's thanks. "Since you have such a request, then this concubine will thank fellow Taoist." Spring Sunflower says with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, please wait a few days. This concubine will pack them up and give them to fellow Taoist." I'll have to trouble fellow Taoist." Xiaohua enters the pavilion with a smile and casually closes the door. Spring Sunflower's gaze is complicated. She looks at the half-closed door of the pavilion and turns around to leave. At night, still inside Linlang Pavilion. At this time, a crescent moon hangs in the sky. The silver moonlight sprinkles on the rippling blue lake water. Sitting on the railing of Linlang Pavilion, one can be intoxicated by the night scenery before one's eyes without using any magic. Spring Sunflower, do you blame me for being ruthless to you during the day? A clear and melodious voice echoes. Matched with such a beautiful moon, it is very pleasant to listen to. This servant doesn't dare. Spring Sunflower answers without hesitation. It was all this servant's carelessness that made a mistake. This servant deserves to be punished however Manor Lord wants to punish me. Sigh, now that I think about it, I was also angry at that time. Chun-Yi says with some embarrassment, "Even if you want to punish me, there is no need to make you take the blame. Even more so, you shouldn't be considered as guilty as Spring Sect." This servant understands. This servant knows that Manor Lord won't be so ruthless. Spring Sunflower says with a smile. It's just that the situation during the day was too dangerous. If it wasn't for Xiaohua, oh, that's right. What did Xiaohua want to do with the poisoned youth-retaining grass? Did you find out clearly? Chenny nods and asks. Of course this servant knows. Spring Sunflower says with a smile. This guy actually has a hobby of collecting strange spirit herbs or seeds. During the day, when this servant sent him back to the pavilion, I wanted to thank him with spirit herbs first. He actually didn't want them and only wanted some rare seeds. Even if they're dead and won't germinate, it's fine. This is actually a strange hobby. He wouldn't have any ulterior motives, right? Chun-Yi is also surprised. She seems to have never heard of a cultivator with this hobby. This servant also doesn't know. That's why I didn't dare to casually agree to his request. Spring Sunflower smiles apologetically. Haha, I understand. Chun-Yi claps her hands and says, You all shouldn't forget his origin. Origin? Spring Sunflower is surprised. She turns to look at Xiaolan and the others, not understanding. Sigh. Xiaohua was born as a loose cultivator. Although he is now a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect and can be considered a famous sect, he can't change the habit of cultivating since young. Chun-Yi's face is full of disdain. Didn't you hear what he said? The youth-retaining grass was eaten by him. He is afraid of being poor. He wants to take anything good he sees, even if it is some withered seeds. The spirit herbs you gave him aren't rare, right? Of course. How can the servant give him rare spirit herbs? Spring Sunflower quickly says with a smile. That's right. Chun-Yi curls her lips. He would rather have some seeds that he has never seen before than these ordinary spirit herbs. Isn't this a strange hobby? Manor Lord is wise. Spring Sunflower says with a smile. Then, how should this servant deal with him? Just give him useless things. Chun-Yi impatiently waves her hand. Can he grow flowers out of the seeds? No matter what, he is your savior. Manor Lord is this servant's savior. This servant knows clearly. Spring Sunflower says with a smile. This servant is just saying it to him. And as long as you know, Chun-Yi waves her hand, looks at the sky, and says to Qiuzhan, Go and invite fellow Taoist Zhu for a chat. Yes, this servant knows. Spring Sunflower and Qiuzhan both nods. After looking at each other, Qiuzhan quickly walks away. Not long after, a tall, dignified middle-stage gold core cultivator follows Qiuzhan to Linlang Pavilion. Manor Lord Chun is in such a good mood. Zhu Qinghe seems to be very familiar with Chun-Yi. He looks around without any trace of politeness and says, Today's beautiful scenery, if not for Qiulai's mouth, it would be inferior. Fellow Taoist Zhu, this kind of lake and moonlight should be drunk in spring sleep. Why do you need Qiulai's mouth? It's not appropriate. It's not appropriate. Chun-Yi shook her head without any trace of politeness. Zhu Qinghe is a cultivator around 60 years old. Looks like Chun-Yi's father. He waves his hand and says with a smile, That's because you female cultivators are sentimental. You're different from common men like me. Without Qiulai's spiciness, how can you taste the taste of a battlefield call? What does a battlefield call have to do with this moonlight and lake scenery? Chun-Yi is curious. Zhu Qinghe says with a smile, I don't have soldiers in front of me, but I have soldiers in my heart. Can it work? Yes, of course it works. Chun-Yi claps her hands and says, If fellow Taoist Zhu didn't have soldiers in his heart. Qiuzhan, bring wine for fellow Taoist Zhu. Yes, Manor Lord. Qiuzhan smiles and takes out 3 fist-sized jade cups. Fellow Taoist, Chun is really stingy. Zhu Qinghe glances at them and points with his hand. It's not that I'm stingy, it's just that fellow Taoist Zhu doesn't need to come. Chun-Yi says with a smile. Even Qiuzhan is shy with strangers. Yes, I understand. Qiuzhan hurriedly takes out a jade bottle from her storage bag and puts it on the jade plate with a smile. Good wine. Zhu Qinghe doesn't care. He points with his hand, and a yellow spiritual wine flies out from the jade bottle and into his mouth. Give me some spring slumber wine. Chun-Yi says to Chun Kuei, You all can leave as well. Yes, Chun Kuei takes out the jade bottle and puts it next to Chen Yi's hand. She salutes with Xia Lan and the others and leaves together. Fellow Taoist Zhu, let me toast you. Chun Yi raises her jade cup and says with a smile, Thank you, Manor Lord Chun. Zhu Qinghe raises his jade bottle and says with a smile. The two drink for a while and chat. Chun Yi asks, Fellow Taoist Zhu, a few years ago, I listened to your arrangement and placed Buried Flower Manor here. You said it would only take a few months, but in the blink of an eye, a few years have passed. Why haven't I heard anything from you? Could it be that there's something wrong with that place? Or maybe we didn't prepare enough? Manor Lord Chun, if there's no news, would I dare to come here? Zhu Qinghe says with a smile, the last thing was found by fellow Taoist Xie in the Flame Forest Swamp 4 years ago. Although we didn't prepare enough, it was enough for us to go there. If I didn't have some trivial matters to attend to, I could have gone there 4 years ago. That's strange. Chun Yi says curiously, fellow Taoist Zhu is the mastermind of this trip. The things that are mainly useful to you. We're just accompanying you to take a look. Fellow Taoist Zhu doesn't want the things there. What kind of trivial matters do you have to attend to? Forgive me for not telling you. But when we get there, Manor Lord Chun will know. Zhu Qinghe shakes his head and says, even if others don't tell you, Manor Lord Chun will know. That's strange. Chen Yi puts one hand on her forehead and seems to be drunk. I'm flattered. Fellow Taoist Zhu, can you tell me in advance? Zhu Qinghe shakes his head slightly. Manor Lord Chun, you better not be curious. It's good for both of us. Then I won't ask any more questions. Chun Yi raises her cup and says, let's hope that this trip will be successful. Do you still need to say it? We've prepared for more than 10 years. If we don't succeed, how can we show our faces? Zhu Qinghe laughs and raises his cup. Chapter 1983. Meanwhile, Xiaohua was sitting cross-legged inside the pavilion, his mind entering the space. The beauty retaining grass that he had previously thrown and was placed on the ground by itself. At this time, it seemed that although the poisonous saliva did not further deteriorate, because the beauty retaining grass only had a stem and no roots, it was simply impossible for it to survive. Xiaohua's illusion of a good thing simply did not work. Yes, with the increase of my cultivation base and realm, the range of this space has increased a lot. Now it seems to be almost 100 li. Moreover, with the increase of my realm, my mind seems to be able to control the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the space. Of course, this is just a feeling. How to control it needs to be carefully comprehended. Xiaohua's mind flew to a high place in the space, and he thought rather proudly. Moreover, although this heavenly starry sky seems to be within 100 li of space, the specific range seems to be endless, far beyond the space, and the mind cannot reach it. The karma hand under the heavenly starry sky is a little clearer. It should be because Senior Huang Yi's suffering greatly affected me. However, this karma hand is definitely not that simple. Now that I look at this blurry karma hand, I have a feeling of worship, as if everything is under its control. In the future, if I have a great opportunity to comprehend it, then how great will my divine ability be? Xiaohua somewhat looked forward to the future when his cultivation base reached large success. After thinking for a moment, Xiaohua's heart was full of hope, and he laughed in a low voice. This young master's space is so wonderful. Can it still be a small fish in the Xiaoyu continent? Although the person who sealed this young master's Niwen Palace has great divine ability, he definitely can't think of this young master's space's foundation. This young master should still quietly cultivate. When my wings are full, it won't be too late to find someone to settle accounts. Yes, at that time, this young master's origin will also be revealed. Immediately, Xiaohua's heart was moved again, and his body slightly trembled. Damn, this young master has too many good things. There is no one to guide me properly. When Senior Huang Yi entered the ghost path, wasn't he forced to divide his soul into thousands of pieces because of the Immortal Alliance's experts? My mind is in space. Not only do I have to comprehend the way of heaven, but I also have to comprehend the hand of karma. I even have to go out of space to deal with it. Why can't I split my mind? Not to mention the blood shadow art. Wouldn't Confucian cultivators, Buddhist cultivators, and even ghost cultivators be able to cultivate all Dharma spells? When Xiaohua thought of this, he was abnormally excited. He released his Buddhist sense and looked around the pavilion again and again. After confirming that there was nothing unusual, he sent his Buddhist sense into the mark left behind by Huang Yi and carefully searched. However, after he found it and finished reading the so-called doppelganger technique of the ghost cultivator, his expression became somewhat uncertain. This technique was called inextricably linked. It divided the body of the ghost into thousands of parts, but these thousands of parts were exactly the same as the core of the ghost. It could be said that each doppelganger was the original ghost, and each doppelganger could cultivate and even devour other doppelganger. In other words, tens of thousands of years ago, every fish in the cold river with Huang Yi's doppelganger in its body was Huang Yi himself. Huang Yi didn't explain clearly which fish's soul escaped from the Immortal Alliance's hands in the end, or if it was her hidden main soul that escaped the Immortal Alliance's pursuit. However, the hardships involved were inevitable. Huang Yi was already in the realm of 10,000 deaths, which was why he took the risk to use this technique and luckily escaped a so-called path of survival. Moreover, this technique was a ghost cultivator's secret inheritance, and was also a technique used exclusively by ghost cultivators. It couldn't be used in other cultivation paths. Even if Xiaohua thoroughly comprehended this technique and didn't use it on his soul, he would only split his mind. That would be too Xiaohus, and in the future, he would have to deal with the problem of how to merge them. Although there was a description of devouring in the technique, was the mind the same as the soul? What about the effect on the two minds after devouring? This was all unknown. Xiaohua was a normal mortal realm cultivator, so it was unlikely that he would take this strange risk. Forget it, Xiaohua slapped his forehead and said with a bitter smile. I was too whimsical. Although I can't slow down my cultivation, I can't advance too rashly either. Although I have the auspicious talisman to protect me. If I take this kind of risk, there will always be an accident, and then I will be consigned to eternal damnation. Let's take a look at the specific technique first. It won't be too late to take the risk in the future if I can't do it. Immediately, Xiaohua withdrew his Buddhist consciousness, closed his eyes, and recalled the countless threads technique word by word, carefully comprehending it. After an unknown amount of time, he heard footsteps outside the pavilion. Xiaohua slightly opened his eyes, and with a sweep of his divine sense, he stood up and walked out of the pavilion. He smiled and said to Chun Kuei, who was slowly walking over, Fellow Taoist, do you have any good news? Hee. I wonder what fellow Taoist Xiao is referring to by good news. Chun Kuei also said with a smile, Naturally, it's the Manor Lord. When will you bring the thing I want? Xiaohua rolled his eyes and said in a low voice, Then fellow Taoist will be disappointed. Chun Kuei pursed her lips and said, In the past few days, other than Senior Zhu who came to my burial flower manor, no other seniors came, and the Manor Lord also didn't seem to have done anything. So it's like that. Xiaohua didn't seem disappointed and asked, Fellow Taoist came, could it be that I can leave the manor? That's strange, fellow Taoist Xiao. Chun Kuei said curiously, I promised to reward fellow Taoist Xiao. How could fellow Taoist Xiao forget this matter? With that said, Chun Kuei took out a storage bag from her waist and handed it to Xiaohua, saying, This is what I promised fellow Taoist Xiao a few days ago. Now, fortunately, I didn't disappoint you. I brought all the trash of my burial flower manor over these years and gave it to fellow Taoist Xiao. All these years, everything? Xiaohua blinked his eyes and said with a smile, I thought that these things would be kept secret in burial flower manor, so I didn't dare to have too much hope, so I didn't think of it. Fellow Taoist, please forgive me. Hee, it's just some trash. Since fellow Taoist has taken it, we don't need to destroy it. Chun Kuei saw Xiaohua take the storage bag, and her face was a bit strange. She replied with a smile, Since fellow Taoist Xiao wants it and I can return the favor, Why not? Thank you, fellow Taoist. Xiao Hua didn't look and cupped his hands. No need to thank me. You and I are even. Chun Kuei let out a sigh of relief and returned the greeting. Fellow Taoist Xiao still needs to keep this matter a secret and can't mention it to a third person. I'll leave now. Fellow Taoist Xiao, please wait here. Presumably, the Manor Lord will have arrangements. If fellow Taoist has any other matters, you can tell the servants to call me over. Okay. Xiao Hua replied and watched Chun Kuei leave. Xiao Hua waited until Chun Kuei left before closing the door. He thought that Burial Flower Manor would be on guard against him, but he didn't expect that Chun Kuei would really deliver these things. However, when he opened the storage bag and scanned it with his divine sense, he was even more delighted. Chapter 1984. It turned out that there were not only a lot of seeds in the storage bag, but also a few withered and broken jade orchid bamboos. What surprised Xiao Hua the most was that the roots of the beauty-retaining grass that he had always wanted were also in front of him. Thinking of what Chun Kuei had said, Xiao Hua secretly nodded and said in his heart, "Giving people immortal grass leaves a lingering fragrance." Sure enough. Therefore, Xiao Hua didn't hesitate. His mind entered the space and woke up all the puppets. On a piece of wasteland, he leveled the medicinal field and prepared to plant all the abandoned seeds. The jade orchid bamboos were inserted into the pool of water where the water-patterned butterfly was. As for the lifeless roots of the beauty-retaining grass, Xiao Hua thought for a moment and threw them far away at the edge of the space. He didn't want to do anything at this time to avoid any accidents. It seems that I have to properly understand the control of space. Xiao Hua thought. Now there are more and more things in the space. Little silver and little yellow are obedient, but if the dream mirage butterfly hatches from the egg, I may not be able to control it. I have to separate these things. Xiao Hua already understood the cultivation method of countless threads. It was very strange, so he didn't dare to try it this time. Thinking for a moment, he used earth amplification to slowly refine the earth crystal Yao milk. At the same time, he began to comprehend the mystery of soul stab in his heart. Far to the north of the country of Shi, in a place where there were few people, the wind whistled and yellow sand filled the air. The sand and dust that covered the sky constantly fluttered in the air, making the whole world look like a dim yellow. A dim yellow brilliance flew across the distant sky, and then a powerful divine sense swept through the yellow sand. When the brilliance fell and the brilliance slightly dissipated, a young cultivator appeared. This cultivator's face was thin, his body was slender, and under a pair of sword-like eyebrows, his eyes were bright and full of expression. The most peculiar thing was that the cultivator was carrying a long sword on his back. This cultivator was none other than the sect master of Seven Skills Sect, Reverend Lu Ni, a late nascent soul stage cultivator. Reverend Lu Ni showed his figure, patted his hand, and took out a jade slip from his storage bag. He scanned it with his divine sense, then looked up at the surroundings and said in a low voice, "It's here." However, to create such a vicious scene, that fellow is quite thoughtful. Then, Immortal Liushu waved his hand, and the long sword behind his back instantly turned into a rainbow, splitting into four and flying away in different directions. After 10 minutes, the four swords flew back. As expected, there's no one around. The corners of Reverend Lu Su's mouth curved into a smile. He was just about to take back his sword when suddenly, a slight buzzing sound came out from under his feet. Reverend Lu Ni was slightly startled. He had already checked this place before, otherwise he would not have missed it. How could it be ordinary if he, a late nascent soul cultivator, could not find it? Indeed, after the faint cry, a few palm-sized, yellowish desert scorpions slowly crawled out of the sand, not far away from Reverend Lu Yun. Desert scorpion! Reverend Lu Ni was somewhat surprised, but now that he had seen the desert scorpions, he felt slightly relieved. This is the edge of the northern desert. Although there are few people around, it's not as harsh as the northern desert. The desert scorpions should not have come here. Reverend Lu and I knew that the desert scorpions were born with the nature of earth and mixed together with the sand of the northern desert. Ordinary divine sense could not separate them at all. Therefore, it was not surprising that he could not find them. However, what happened next made him frown deeply. According to the ancient records, the desert scorpion was usually docile and good at attacking groups of people, and would never attack unless it was disturbed. But now, it had actually circled above the yellow sand for a while, then wielded its large, sharp pincers and flew straight towards Reverend Lu Ming. Reverend Lu and I scanned them with his divine sense and could not help laughing. Although the desert scorpions were terrifying, there were tens of thousands of them. Moreover, in the depth of the northern desert, once they appeared, there would definitely be hundreds of thousands or even millions of them. These few desert scorpions, not to mention Reverend Lu and I, a late Yuanying stage cultivator, even gold core stage cultivators or foundation establishment stage cultivators could definitely kill them with their own magical abilities. Swish! Reverend Lu and I casually waved his flying sword. A sword light flashed, and unexpectedly, several desert scorpions were killed at the same time from different directions. Looking at the remains of the desert scorpions falling on the sand and then being blown away by the wind, Reverend Lu and I slightly shook his head. Cultivation is always the theme of eternity. As strong as Yuanying stage cultivators, as weak as desert scorpions, in front of an existence with a profound cultivation, they can only be. Unfortunately, before Reverend Lu and I could finish his words, a swish-swish sound was heard from under his feet. The clear cry became more and more ear-piercing. This is bad. No wonder Reverend Lu and I could not express his feelings. His face slightly changed, and he hurriedly flew up from the sand and floated in midair. Underneath his feet, within the range of tens of miles, desert scorpions emerged from the yellow waves one after another, like surging tadpoles. What surprised Reverend Lu and I the most was that not only were the clear cries mixed with each other, faintly having the effect of seizing one's soul, but also, one after another, weak divine wills, mixed with emotionlessness, excitement, anger, and other emotions, swept across his body. Oh my! Reverend Lu and I was slightly startled. Although he was not afraid of these little things, being surrounded by tens of thousands of desert scorpions was also an extremely annoying thing. Moreover, there might be other spiritual creatures among these desert scorpions. Buzz! While Reverend Lu and I was hesitating, hundreds and thousands of desert scorpions had already flown up and swarmed towards him from all directions. Sun Yunzi, this is not a trick of this guy, is it? A thought suddenly came to Reverend Luni's mind. He had come here at Sun Yunzi's invitation, but he immediately denied it. It was definitely not an easy thing to plot against a late-stage nascent soul cultivator, and this simple northern desert was simply not a good place to do so. Go! Reverend Lu and I waved his hand, and the long sword in his hand flashed with several beams of light, killing all the desert scorpions within 1,000 feet of him. At the same time, his body also flew up and was about to fly into the distance. However, when Reverend Luni's body had just flown up 1,000 feet, a pitch-black beam of light suddenly flashed across the yellow sand about 100 feet below him. Following the whistling wind and sand in midair, that beam of light was both crooked and extremely fast, striking towards Reverend Luni's lower body. Ouch! There's more! Reverend Lu and I was slightly angry. He rubbed his left hand, and a splendid ray of light was produced. As his hand gesture fell, the ray of light fell down rapidly, and the wind and sand in the ray of light all stopped, unable to move at all. In the area where the ray of light fell, the desert scorpions within 1,000 feet radius were either floating in midair or entrenched on the sand layer, or had just drilled out of the yellow sand. All of them stopped there quietly, not moving even a little bit. Kill! Reverend Lu and I stretched out his right hand, and a bright silver sword light unexpectedly emerged from his hand. As his right palm chopped down, the sword light rushed towards the black light that was attacking him. With only a slight touch, The black light was smashed, and the sword light did not stop at all, piercing into the yellow sand. Below the yellow sand, about 10 feet of yellow sand slightly trembled, and then became still again. Seeing this, Reverend Liu and I did not stay any longer. His body slightly flashed, and he directly rushed up, flying to 1,000 feet high, and then threw himself in a certain direction. However, as soon as he flew away, a divine thought swept over from another direction and just locked onto him. Is that Fairy Ingzhua? Reverend Liu and I was slightly stunned and immediately recognized that familiar divine thought. His flowing body stopped in midair. Reverend Liu and I, you are also here for the appointment? In the distant 7-colored ray of light, Fairy Ingzhua, who was dressed in a 7-colored robe, also showed her figure and also transmitted her voice to Reverend Liu and I in surprise. Yes, I am here for the appointment. It's Sun Yunzi who invited I. Fellow Taoist Sun Yunzi, what are you trying to do? Fairy Ingzhua's figure stopped 100 feet away from Reverend Liu and I and said very strangely, I thought that I was the only one who invited him. I didn't expect that fellow Taoist would also be invited. Then, her divine thought swept under her feet, and she slightly frowned. Moreover, there are so many desert scorpions here. Could it be that Sun Yunzi has some ulterior motives? It's still not time yet. Let's wait and see. Reverend Liu and I glanced under his feet and said coldly, he can't be thinking of leaving all of us in the northern desert, right? Fairy Ingzhua covered her mouth and laughed. Unless he, Shanghua sect, also doesn't want to establish himself in the Dawn Rain continent. The two late, nascent soul stage cultivators stood in the sky with a strong wind, and the brilliance around their bodies was not affected by the wind at all, as if they were taking a leisurely stroll. After the time it took to eat a meal, Sun Yunzi's divine thought swept over from afar. Seeing the two of them standing in the sky, he couldn't help but be startled and transmitted his voice, fellow Taoists. Although the wind in the northern desert is very strong, it's not the time for the two of you to walk hand in hand. It's too cold to be high up in the sky. Sun Yunzi. Reverend Liu and I sneered and looked at the faint red light on Sun Yunzi's body and transmitted his voice. You found a good place. If I hadn't reacted quickly, I'm afraid that I wouldn't have been able to see fellow Taoist. Fellow Taoist Liu Kong, what do you mean? Sun Yunzi was slightly surprised and deliberately swept his divine thought around. When he went deep into the yellow sand, he realized that something was wrong. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. This is I's fault. I passed by here a few years ago and saw that there were no traces of people here. It was a good place, so I invited you two to meet here. Who would have thought that after not seeing each other for a few years, there would be desert scorpions here? I don't think it's fellow Taoist Sun Yunzi's fault. Fairy Ingzhua interrupted again. These desert scorpions are usually in the depths of the northern desert. Who knows how they came to the edge today? And these things don't seem to be very strong, so they're not troublesome to us. Reverend Liu and I naturally knew the balance of the tripartite balance, so he didn't say anything and asked fellow Taoist Sun Yunzi, why did you ask us to meet here today? Sun Yunzi didn't care about Reverend Liu Su's ambiguous attitude. Instead, he looked at Fairy Ingzhua and said, I've come to you, my fellow Taoists, for two pieces of news. One is good news, and the other is bad news. Which one would you like to hear first? Fellow Taoist Sun Yunzi, you're so interesting. Fairy Ingzhua laughed. I haven't listened to someone talk like this for a long time. I didn't expect that fellow Taoist, who is thousands of years old, could still be so leisurely. Chapter 1985. If it can make Sun Yunzi laugh like this, then it must be good news. Immortal Liu Shi's heart moved, as if he thought of something. His body moved slightly, and he said, I am willing to listen to good news. Really? Fairy Ingzhua also thought of something, and clapped her hands. Could it be that that thing has been completed? You two fellow Taoists are right. Sun Yunzi clapped his hands, and 2 jade bottles were taken out. He waved his hands, and the bottles flew to the two of them. I did not disappoint you, and finally succeeded in refining the Python Dragon Pill. Humph! Immortal Lu Shi waved his hand, and a huge light shadow flew out, firmly covering the jade bottles. He said, "This is fellow Taoist Sun Yunzi. If it was fellow Taoist Ing Zhua, I'm afraid you would have succeeded in refining it 10 years ago." No. Fairy Ing Zhua's face was also filled with joy. She slightly waved her arm, and a big hand flew out, catching the jade bottles. Then she said, "Although my Xuanyin school is founded on alchemy, fellow Taoist Sun Yunzi's alchemy skills are not inferior to I dare not say that I can refine the Python Dragon Pill in just a few years." Fairy Ing Zhua took the jade bottles, and her cherry lips slightly opened. She spat out a mouthful of Zhen Yuan and opened the jade bottles. A fist-sized pill, emitting a blazing brilliance like a dancing flame, flew out of the jade bottles. As the pill appeared in the air, an incomparably rich medicinal fragrance spread around Fairy Ing Zhua. This medicinal fragrance seemed to be stagnant and did not disperse in the slightest in the astral wind. Roar! The faint roar of a dragon came from the Python Dragon Core. Within the flames, a small white snake was rapidly circling around the core. Every time it circled around, the white snake would change. After circling around for 81 times, it actually turned into a real fire dragon. This fire dragon was exactly the appearance of the little white dragon. Great! Fairy Ing Zhua stared at it for half the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, then opened her mouth, and Zhen Yuan spread out, and the Python Dragon Pill was sucked into the jade bottle. Then she cast layers of spells on the jade bottle and put it away in her arms. Immortal Lu Shi's face was also full of surprise, and he had already put away the jade bottle. "Thank you, fellow Taoist Xuanyin." Fairy Ing Zhua glanced at Reverend Lu Shi. Then both of them cupped their fists and said, "This Boa Dragon Pill is quite different from the ones recorded in the books. I'm afraid our chances of stepping into deity transformation have increased by another 10%. You don't have to be so polite." Sun Yunzi sighed in his heart, but he still put on a smile and said, "We have already made an agreement to refine this Python Dragon Pill. I don't dare to go against our agreement. As for the mutation of the Python Dragon Core, it should be due to the difference in the core of the Python Dragon that we killed." Of course, Reverend Lu Ni nodded slightly. Although Sun Yunzi had given him the Python Dragon Pill today because of the vow of heart, and it was something he deserved, he still felt a little grateful to Sun Yunzi for giving him the Python Dragon Pill. Therefore, his tone became much gentler. According to the ancient records, the Python Dragon Pill is a half dragon and half python. By taking the Python Dragon Pill, we have solved the mystery of the transformation of a python into a dragon and stepped into the separating divinity stage from Yuanying. Today, this Python Dragon Pill is actually a transformation from a python into a dragon, and we have a deeper understanding of the process. Our chances of stepping into the separating divinity stage have increased by more than 10%, and even 20% is not surprising. Yes, there's indeed something wrong with that white python. Fairy Ing Zhua looked at Sun Yunzi thoughtfully. "Fellow Taoist Sun Yunzi, have you found the soul that flew away?" Sun Yunzi smiled bitterly. "I have used all my power, but I still can't find any clues. I can't find it anywhere." However, the white python was in the separating divinity stage when it was alive. Since it has already turned into a soul essence, it is nothing to worry about. If I can't find it, then I can't find it. Sun Yunzi naturally knew the effect of the Python Dragon Pill was due to the dragonization incantation, but he couldn't say it out loud. He sighed in his heart that he didn't have enough luck and quickly changed the topic. "Today, I invited the two of you here to tell you the good news of the Python Dragon Pill and the bad news." "Oh." Reverend Lu and I glanced at Fairy Ing Zhua and asked curiously, "There are not many things in this world that can make us think it is bad news, right?" "Exactly." Fairy Ing Zhua smiled. "Fellow Taoist Sun Yunzi, please enlighten us." "Hee, fellow Taoists, don't pretend that you don't know anything." Sun Yunzi smiled. "Since I know, It is impossible for you to not know. Moreover, I took out the Python Dragon Pill, so naturally I have full sincerity. This is related to the future of our three sects. Fairy Yingjue and Reverend Lu and I both agreed. After a while, Reverend Lu and I smiled and said, "This is related to the future of our sects, so it is naturally a big matter. The people of the Immortal Alliance will definitely stand up for us. Why should we be anxious?" Immortal Alliance? Sun Yunzi sneered. They're a group of old farts. Why would they care about our life and death? They have reached a certain level. As long as they pass the heavenly tribulation and become immortals, they will be free and unfettered. They will not care about us. We are still far away from the Mahayana stage and the heavenly tribulation. So you two fellow Taoists have also noticed the change in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Fairy Yingjue saw that Sun Yunzi and Reverend Lu and I were tit for tat again, so she had to ask. Yes. Sun Yunzi nodded. Fellow Taoist, Yingjue is right. I have thought hard for a long time, and even sought the elders of our sects, but still to no avail. Reverend Lu and I did not speak, but the expression on his face was the same. I'm the same, Fairy Yingjue said with a bitter face. In the past 10 years, the disciples we have recruited have become more and more mixed. They're no longer as excellent as before. Moreover, the bloodline of aristocratic families has been awakening frequently. If there are no restrictions, they will definitely become great talents in the future. Cultivator aristocratic families, and even those rogue cultivators may be on par with our sects. Rogue cultivators? Reverend Lu and I shook his head slightly. The aristocratic families that fellow Taoist mentioned are possible, but the so-called rogue cultivators are unnecessary. The rogue cultivators that I mentioned are devil cultivators. Fairy Yingjue sneered. Fellow Taoist Lu Kong does not know about the rise of the heavenly demon sect. There are also many rogue cultivators who have joined the devil sect. Yes, I naturally know about this. Reverend Lu and I nodded. They are just a group of motley crew. Under the banner of devil cultivators, they are incomparably filthy and have all kinds of cultivation. They will not amount to anything. Yes, it seems that there used to be a small organization abandoned by the heavens, which was controlled by the heavenly demon sect. The heavenly demon sect is nothing in our eyes. At this time, we don't need to care about them. Sun Yunzi smiled and said, "What I mean is, if our three sects still don't find a way to recruit disciples, or find a suitable cultivation method for future disciples, then the three major cultivation sects of the state of Shi, I'm afraid we'll have to change sects. It can't be that serious." Reverend Lu and I laughed and said, "I've had a deep talk with the elders. The current cultivation method is still usable, but the method of selecting disciples has to be changed. Only when the method is found, our three sects will still be able to live forever." Chapter 1986. I'm not afraid now, but what about in the future? Sun Yunzi said solemnly. It's only been a few decades. What if it's 1,000 years later or 10,000 years later? The spiritual chi of heaven and earth has completely changed. Can cultivation methods still be cultivated? Hearing this, Fairy Yingjue and Immortal Lu and I were silent for a while. Obviously, they had thought about it. This matter is unusual. I want to discuss it with you two first. I have a plan, and then I'll discuss it with the leaders of several sects in Ming Country and Lian Country. We have to come up with a countermeasure. Sun Yunzi said, I always feel that this matter is unusual. If it's not handled well, the Taoist sect may be doomed eternally. Maybe, Fairy Yingjue sighed. I also did something in the sect, but the effect was not too obvious. Moreover, this involves the secret of my Xuanyan sect. Forgive I for not being able to tell you everything. Well, since fellow Taoist Yingjue said so, you're already open-minded. Sun Yunzi glanced at Immortal Lu and I, and said with a smile, to be honest, I also did some experiments, but they were all not good. There's no effect. What about Huan Country? Immortal Lu and I sneered. I wonder how their sword cultivators and beast cultivators are doing. Hee, fellow Taoist Lu Kong, you're right. Sun Yunzi said with a smile. if our Taoist sect is in danger, I'm afraid these cultivators will have an opportunity to take advantage of it. According to the message from the disciples in the sect, they've also changed. However, the specific situation is not clear. After all, the disciples who can go deep into Huan country are all low-level cultivators. It's impossible for them to reach the core. Fairy Ingzhua thought for a while and said, "Well, I'll go back and think about it carefully. If there's any progress, let's communicate more." Sun Yunzi waved his hand and said, "In fact, if only one sect has the secret, that sect will dominate. However, if the Taoist sect declines, that sect will definitely not last long." Fellow Taoists, do you think so too? Yes. Fairy Ingzhua nodded, while Immortal Lu and I did not comment. Of course, apart from these two pieces of news, I invited you here today for another more important matter, which is related to our cultivation. I'd like to hear your opinions. As Sun Yunzi spoke, he looked at the two's expressions. Just as he expected, the two's expressions were calm. Clearly, they had the same perception as Sun Yunzi. Now that the spiritual qi of heaven and earth has changed, not only does it affect the cultivation of low-level disciples, but it also restricts high-level cultivators like us. Sun Yunzi opened his mouth and said, "Many of the elders of my splendid sect who have been cultivating diligently have not made any progress in their cultivation for more than 10 years. Occasionally, they would make some progress, but it was all due to other opportunities. I believe the same is true for Xuanyan School and Qiqiao sect." Seeing that Immortal Lu and I and Fairy Ingzhua did not speak, Sun Yunzi's eyes flickered, and he continued, "Low-level cultivators need very little spiritual qi of heaven and earth. The change of spiritual qi of heaven and earth will not affect their cultivation. However, we use too much spiritual qi of heaven and earth for our cultivation. Now that the spiritual qi of heaven and earth has changed, our cultivation will naturally be affected. The same must be true for the other seniors of the Divine Transformation Realm, Void Refinement Realm, and Body Integration Realm. In other words, simply absorbing the spiritual qi of heaven and earth will not satisfy our cultivation needs. Spiritual herbs and pills are like spiritual stones. Only when they are precious can they support our cultivation progress. For example, the Python Dragon Pill is not only needed for us to break through the barrier, but also for us to replenish our spiritual power. The spiritual stone mine will also be the key to our cultivation in the future. Moreover, as early as 10 years ago, there seems to be some news from the Immortal Alliance that many sects have already begun to stockpile spiritual stones to cope with the change of spiritual qi of heaven and earth. The current spiritual herbs can still satisfy our needs for refining pills. However, if the spiritual herbs in the future are mixed with the change of spiritual qi of heaven and earth, the quality of the pills refined will definitely decline. At that time, even if they can satisfy low-level cultivators, they will not be able to satisfy high-level cultivators like us. In addition, I have just received a piece of news. In the past 10 years, there were 3 seniors of the Great Ascension Realm who went through the heavenly tribulations. However, they never returned. Their natal spiritual tablets were damaged, and none of them succeeded. Speaking of this, Immortal Lu Shi, who had been silent all this time, said, "Sun Yunzi, aren't your words a bit alarmist? If the 3 seniors all succeeded, how could it be called heavenly tribulations? Even if 300 people failed to pass the heavenly tribulations, it would be normal, right?" "Lu Shi, don't you understand?" Sun Yunzi said angrily. "The spiritual qi of heaven and earth has changed, and so has the heavenly Tao. I'm afraid our path to immortality will be blocked." "It doesn't seem to be that serious," Fairy Ingzhua said hesitantly. "The Taoist sect of the Dawn Rain continent has existed for tens of thousands of years since the ancient times. It won't be so fragile. If our cultivation can improve, what will happen to the Taoist sect?" Sun Yunzi said angrily. "What will happen to it? All cultivators will reach the nascent soul stage at the end of their cultivation. In the future, they will just wait for the end of their lifespan to come and enter the reincarnation cycle." "No, impossible. Fairy Yingzhua smiled and shook her head. Fellow cultivator Sun Yunzi is worrying too much. Right now, there are many Great Ascension Realm and Tribulation Passing Realm seniors in the 3 countries of the Dawnrain continent. There are even more Great Ascension Realm and Tribulation Passing Realm seniors in the distant Cultivation Alliance and Cultivation Empire. How can the cultivation world fall into such a state? What's impossible? Sun Yunzi saw that immortal Lu she was about to retort. So he said, in the ancient times, the Celestials were in charge. They didn't cultivate and only focused on the sun and the moon. Their bodies were powerful, and they dominated for a period of time. However, in the end, they were replaced by the Taoist sect, the Buddhist sect, the Confucian sect, the Sword sect, and other sections. Do you dare to say that we can compare to the Celestials in the ancient times? Seeing that immortal Lu Shi and Fairy Yingzhua were deep in thought, Sun Yunzi took the opportunity to say, since this is the case, we should look for opportunities while we are at death's door and find a way out for the Taoist sect. During this period, cultivation resources are the most important. Immortal Lu Shi didn't have time to refute, so he asked, fellow cultivator Sun Yunzi, what do you mean? Sun Yunzi calmly said, in I's opinion, our 3 sects should control the majority of the spirit stone veins in the country of Shi. Today, I invited the 2 of you here to discuss how to divide the spirit stone veins in the country of Shi into 3 parts. Then, we will divide the spirit stone veins in the country of Shi among the 3 parts. Great. Fairy Yingzhua clapped her hands and said, I also have the same idea. Although this matter may take tens of thousands of years, or even millions of years to come, now that we have seen the opportunity, we should prepare for the future. Sun Yunzi raised his eyebrows and said, what does fellow cultivator Lu Kong think? I don't have any objection. When it came to benefits, immortal Lu Shi would not refuse. However, he pointed his finger and said with a smile, fellow cultivator Sun Yunzi, you have found a good place. There are more troublesome spirit objects coming, so we can't stay here for long. Sun Yunzi scanned with his divine sense and said with a smile, sure enough, let's go. Although the location of our 3 sects is not suitable, there are many other places. There's no need to cause trouble here. After saying that, Sun Yunzi turned into a rainbow and flew towards the south. Fairy Yingzhua and immortal Lu Kong also used their divine powers and left. At the place where immortal Lu Shi killed the desert scorpion. After a while, a huge desert scorpion, about 1,000 feet in size, with a yellowish body and some faintly flickering dark runes, easily drilled out of the yellow sand. Its huge poisonous pincers were shining with a dim light, and its long tail was still buried in the yellow sand. In the buried flower manor, Xiaohua had been comprehending the soul stab for several days. This was a secret method of controlling divine sense, which was very abstruse. However, Xiaohua seemed to be very familiar with the art of divine sense. Others might not be able to comprehend this secret method in their lifetime, but he had gained quite a lot in these few days. This is the secret method of ghost cultivators. I can actually comprehend it by analogy. Am I a genius? Xiaohua's little tail was raised again. However, he immediately thought to himself, damn it, did Chun Yi, the great manor lord, did she go or not? I don't know how long I have to wait. Is Xue Xue in the Haoming City waiting for me? Or has she safely arrived in the Haoming City? Thinking of Chun Yi's magic power as a middle gold core cultivator, Xiaohua unconsciously felt a little discouraged. He knew very well that this soul stab could indeed surprise and wound the opponent's divine sense. However, it was only effective against opponents of the same level or similar divine sense range. If he fought against Chun Yi, not only would the soul stab not hurt her, it would even backfire on him. Cultivation base, realm, they all need to be improved. Xiaohua once again lamented about his time. However, Xiaohua didn't know that just as he was feeling melancholy, there were 4 gold core cultivators sitting casually in the Linlang Pavilion in the middle of the lake in the buried flower manor. Needless to say, it was the beautiful Chun Yi. Her left hand was Zhu Qinghe of the Su Yin school, and her right hand was a cultivator in white clothes. This cultivator looked very ordinary and even had a bitter expression on his face. A slanted and faint scar ran across the back of his ear and went straight into his hair. This cultivator also had a middle gold core cultivation base. Sitting below this cultivator was someone Xiaohua was familiar with. It was Xie Qian of the Immortal Ascension School. Chun Yi raised her cup and said to the cultivator in white, "Chang Yefeng, fellow Taoist Chang. The Huan country's rock border sect is very far away. Fellow Taoist Chang must be tired after coming all the way here. Let me toast you." Chang Yefeng didn't have any smile on his face. Although his words weren't cold, they were still faint. He raised his jade cup and said, "I don't dare. I received fellow Taoist Zhu's message a few years ago and made preparations. I didn't expect to wait for 6 years. I thought this matter was already over, but when I received the message, I remembered this agreement. I rushed here in a hurry, so I'm not tired. Please." Chun Yi slightly raised her cup and used her red lips to touch the jade cup. "Please." Chang Yefeng raised his neck and drank all the spirit wine in the jade cup. He pointed his hand, and a strand of spirit wine flew out from the wine pot next to him and poured into the jade cup. When the jade cup was full, Chang Yefeng raised his head and looked at everyone. He was a bit puzzled and said, "When I heard fellow Taoist Zhu's message, I thought that if we were going to that place, we would have some help. But today, it seems like it's just the 4 of us. Isn't it a bit weak?" Chapter 1987. "Hey, what kind of powerful help do you want?" Zhu Qinghe took a sip of wine and said, "Could it be that you want to see the golden core stage cultivator from the kingdom of Xi? Or the golden core stage cultivator from the kingdom of Meng? Or the golden core stage cultivator from the Utopia faction?" "That's not it," Chang Yefeng said. "If there's them, how can I have a share? I think you won't be able to hold your position as the manager. But that place is dangerous after all. Even nascent soul stage cultivators may be in danger. The 4 of us don't have much confidence, right?" "You worry too much, fellow Chang." Xie Qian smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist, Zhu has already talked to this Xie. He has been to that place and has retreated unscathed. However, there are some places that can't be passed through without special items. To tell you the truth, fellow Taoist, this Xie has also made some preparations over the years. If these preparations aren't enough, we can just return empty-handed. What do we lose?" "That's right, fellow Chang. Fellow Chang, fellow Chang, even fellow Chang, who is at the early stage of the golden core stage, wants to give it a try. Why do you have so many scruples? Could it be that you're inferior to a woman like me?" Chen Yi took the opportunity to laugh. "Hey, that place is one of the top 10 dangerous places in the Xiaoyu continent. It has always been a fierce place. If I didn't have a heart of fear, I'm afraid it's impossible for me to cultivate until now. However, since you've already made such a comprehensive plan, and I've also made sufficient preparations, what's the harm in breaking into that dangerous place?" Chang Yefeng still said lightly, "However, before taking action, we should discuss all the countermeasures clearly." "Yes, what fellow Chang said is very reasonable." Xie Qian clapped his hands and said, "I also took some time to check the ancient books. Fortunately, I obtained some records of that competition. I think it must be the place that fellow Chang mentioned." "Oh, is it?" Zhu Qinghe was overjoyed and said, "It's really a famous sect. The Immortal Ascension sect actually has such a secret record of the competition." "What's in it?" Xie Qian said with a smile. "It's not much. It's just some guesses of some seniors in the sect. However, these guesses are in line with what fellow Chang said. They're in line with some things that I've prepared." Seeing that Xie Qian didn't say more, Zhu Qinghe didn't insist. He nodded and said, "Chang Yefeng is indeed a secret sect. Not many people know about it, and these people have already died, so there are no records. There are no records at all. It's that your sect has some guesses. It's just that." Xie Qian looked around and said with a wry smile, "We seem to be missing a fellow cultivator. Chang, Yefeng Chang. Chang of Chang Chang, fellow Chang, Chang Yu Chang of Chang, Chang, Chang Chang, have Chang Chang." Chong Yefeng nodded and said, "Several years ago, when I was looking for the Firebat King in the Flame Forest Swamp, I met Zhenyi of the Thunder-controlling sect. Zhenyi is a cultivator at the early stage of the Gold Core realm. Although his cultivation is not high, he must be proficient in the thunder-escaping technique of the Thunder-controlling sect. His flying speed must be faster than ours. That day, I gave him the communication charm and the location of the Buried Flowers Manor in exchange for the heavenly Grass that fellow Chong Yefeng mentioned. I haven't received any messages from him in the past few years, and Manor Head Chun hasn't seen him come a visit. I'm afraid that he isn't interested in the heavenly Grass. Just now, on the way here, I was muttering whether I should go to the thunder-controlling sect to invite a cultivator here. Before Xie Zhiqian finished speaking, Zhu Qinghe and Chong Yefeng both said, "Don't. I'm afraid it's not appropriate for a disciple of the thunder-controlling sect to participate." Xie Zhiqian nodded and said, "Yes, I was thinking the same thing. Therefore, I didn't say anything in the jade slip that I gave Zhenyi. I only mentioned the location of the heavenly Grass." Chen-Yi didn't say anything. She just looked at the three of them. When they stopped talking, she smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Xie, you don't mean what you say." "Huh? What do you mean, Manor Head Chen?" Xie Zhiqian asked curiously. "Fellow Taoist Xie, you didn't see Zhenyi in the Flame Forest Swamp, right?" Chen-Yi said with a smile. Yes. How did fellow Taoist Chen know? Could it be that fellow Taoist Zhenyi came?" Xie Zhiqian said happily, "Manor Head Chen, why didn't you say so earlier?" Hee, Zhenyi can't come. He already died in the Flame Forest Swamp." Chun-Yi said with a smile. However, one of his martial nephews came to the Buried Flowers Manor for the heavenly Grass. "Oh," Xie Zhiqian nodded disappointedly. "I know. It's the Foundation Establishment Cultivator that I entrusted the Jade Slip to. I think his name is Hua or something." "Xiao Hua," Chun-Yi said. "He's in the Buried Flowers Manor right now." Oh, not only Xie Zhiqian, but Zhu Qinghe and Chong Yefeng were also surprised. They said with a smile, "The heavenly Grass didn't attract a useful golden core cultivator. Instead, it attracted a useless Foundation Establishment Cultivator. Yes, he was interested in the heavenly Grass's ability to neutralize yin and yang. He wanted to use the heavenly Grass to help his junior sister build her foundation." Chun-Yi explained with a smile. "Like I said, the heavenly Grass is indispensable for cultivators with thunder attribute constitutions. It's impossible that Zhenyi didn't come," Xie Zhiqian said with a smile. "However, Xiao Hua is just a Foundation Establishment Cultivator. Even if he knows the thunder escape technique, it's useless to us." "Indeed, if we bring such a burden with us, who knows what will happen? It's not appropriate." Zhu Qinghe also objected. Chun-Yi said with a smile, "I just made a deal with him. If there's a chance to pick the heavenly Grass, I'll give it to him. I don't plan to bring him with me." Chong Yefeng laughed at this moment. "In my opinion, if Xiao Hua really knows the thunder escape technique, we might as well bring him with us. Maybe he'll be useful. What do you think, fellow Taoists?" "Fellow Taoist Chong, you mean?" Xie Zhiqian blinked and didn't say what he meant. Zhu Qinghe looked at Chun-Yi thoughtfully. Chun-Yi's reaction was also strange. She glanced at Zhu Qinghe and then looked at the wine cup. She didn't say anything, as if there was some heaven-defying Taoist magic in the wine cup. "I still don't think it's appropriate." Zhu Qinghe thought for a moment and still shook his head. "This matter involves. I'm afraid it'll be leaked. If fellow Taoist Xie and fellow Taoist Chong didn't insist, I definitely wouldn't say anything. This Xiao Hua is a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect. If he has some secret methods to tell his master about this matter, if the Imperial Thunder Sect, or even his master interferes, what we can get will be much less. Or maybe it'll be like drawing water with a bamboo basket." Xie Zhiqian and Chong Yefeng heard this and felt somewhat dissatisfied. They opened their mouths, but didn't say anything. Chun-Yi, who hadn't said anything, said at this time, "According to Xiao Hua, he's a rogue cultivator, and his master is only at the late stage of the Foundation Establishment realm." Chapter 1988. What does Manor Lord Chen mean? Zhu Qinghe frowned, seemingly puzzled. Manor Lord Chen means to ignore this disciple called Xiaohua. Chang Yefeng said with a smile, since he's a loose cultivator and his master is only in the late stage of the Foundation establishment realm, he's just a little disciple in the Imperial Thunder sect with no backing. What could he possibly reveal? However, since he doesn't have any background, then he naturally can't know the lightning escape technique, right? Zhu Qinghe's brows relaxed, and he said with a smile, my Su Yin school has plenty of such disciples. Why will we need him there? That's true. Xie Zhiqian nodded. After pondering for a moment, he said, but Zhenyi took him to the Flame Forest Swamp. I'm afraid this guy is riding on Zhenyi's thigh and has received some benefit from Zhenyi. Isn't that simple? Zhenyi said with a smile. Call Xiaohua over and ask him. If he knows the lightning escape technique, bring him along. There are some places where he can still use it. Zhu Qinghe looked at the three of them, calculating in his heart. He understood very well that even if Xiaohua knew the lightning evasion technique, he was still only at the Foundation establishment stage. His flying speed couldn't possibly be faster than them. However, since the three of them had the same intention and had their own plans, he didn't feel like saying anything more. All right, call Xiaohua over and ask him. If he really has a superhuman flying technique, bring him along. Zhu Qinghe nodded and looked at Chun. He also wants to get the heavenly grass. It's always good if he can help. Hearing Chun call him to the Linlang Pavilion, Xiaohua was pleasantly surprised. His little heart was beating wildly. This trip to the Burial Flower Manor was really too smooth. Not only did he obtain some benefits, he only had to take out some ancient secret method to use poison to counter poison, and he was able to exchange it for the sky grass that Shui urgently needed. He was really lucky. Xiaohua even couldn't help but touch the peacock illusion on his chest. However, when he saw the golden core cultivators in Linlang Pavilion, Xiaohua was slightly stunned. He hurriedly greeted Chun first, then greeted them one by one according to their cultivation level. Finally, when he greeted Xie Zhiqian, he said apologetically, Senior Xie, Junior was unable to deliver the jade slip to Marshal Uncle Zhenyi. Junior has failed Senior's trust. Haha, it's okay. Xie Zhiqian laughed. How can anything in the world be perfect? On the other hand, fellow Taoist Zhen Ye's death has truly exceeded I's expectations. My Dawnrain continent has lost another fellow Taoist that we can work together with. Even though the Flame Forest Swamp was a dangerous place, if a golden core cultivator was a little more careful, it might not be a big deal. I didn't expect fellow Taoist Zhen to be. Xiaohua smiled apologetically. Junior is a foundation-building cultivator. Junior isn't clear about Marshal Uncle Zhen's matters. That day, I merely followed him to Flame Forest Swamp. By the time I found Marshal Uncle Zhen, he had already died. Alas, what a tragedy. The price of us cultivators changing the heavens and changing our lives is indeed not cheap. Seeing that Xiaohua was unwilling to speak, Xie Zhiqian didn't ask any further and shook his head with a sigh. Senior Xie is a blessed person. Previously, you returned safely from Flame Forest Swamp, and this time, you retreated with Villa Master Chun and Senior Zhu. It's truly worthy of celebration. Xiaohua smiled and bowed towards Chun, and the others. Junior congratulates you. Haha, Xiaohua, you misunderstood. Chun rolled her eyes and waved her hand. We haven't gone yet. We've made you wait for these past few days. Oh, Xiaohua was slightly stunned and smiled apologetically. Junior thought that seniors had already returned safely, so Junior was asked to come over. May I know, why did you call Junior over at this time? Xiaohua, do you know the lightning evasion technique? Xie Zhiqian asked with a smile. This? Xiaohua was somewhat puzzled. He muttered in his heart and was very hesitant. Haha, Xiaohua. Chun clapped her hand and took out a jade slip. She placed it in front of her and said with a smile, just now, this old woman and fellow Taoist calculated that the heavenly grass is really difficult to obtain. This old woman also doesn't need the heavenly grass, so I don't want to risk my life for this jade slip. However, since you followed fellow Taoist Xie's jade slip to my Burial Flower Manor, it could be said that you have fate with us. This old woman thought that if you know the lightning evasion technique and can help us at a crucial time, you can casually obtain the heavenly grass without me doing anything. And even if you have some difficulties at that time, fellow Taoists, and this old woman will definitely not stand by and watch because of your efforts. Of course, if you don't know the lightning evasion technique, your cultivation is just a child in our eyes. It's fine if you don't go. You could take back this jade slip yourself. The deal that this old woman said a few days ago can't be fulfilled. This. Xiao Hua looked at the jade slip with a somewhat dumbfounded expression. He didn't know what to say. It's better to rely on yourself than others. Chang Yefeng also said with a smile, this Chang's master has always taught I this in my early years. Now, I will also use this to encourage you. Instead of letting fellow Taoist Chen help you, it's better for you to harvest it yourself. Of course, the premise is that you have the ability to do so. Xiaohua really didn't want to cooperate with these golden core stage seniors. He simply couldn't take any advantage. Let's not talk about other things. Just take this matter as an example. Chun Yi returned the jade slip to him. But what about the secret technique? It had been more than 10 days. Xiaohua didn't think that Chun Yi would be like him in the past. She obtained so many jade slips, but didn't know how to use them. She only cared about cultivating her own technique and carefully didn't check them. Now, that Chun Yi returned the jade slip to him. As long as he took it, it would be like drawing water with a bamboo basket. Burial Flower Manor could be considered as a wasted trip. Thinking about Shue's bitterness since the Misty Mountain and her calmness in the face of death, Xiaohua's heart was somewhat sour. If he could do something for his beloved, even if it was a little dangerous, what was there to be afraid of? Moreover, this young master is afraid of you in this Burial Flower Manor. Outside, no matter what dangerous place it is, you don't have the initiative. You also don't know this young master's methods. Why would this young master be afraid of you? Xiaohua lowered his head, thought for a moment, then raised his head again and said with difficulty, for seniors, this junior has practiced some lightning escape technique, but it's only the hibernating lightning escape technique. It hasn't been successful yet. It's 3 times faster than ordinary foundation establishment stage cultivators, but in front of seniors, it's still not a big deal. If this junior goes, I'm afraid I won't be able to help much. Alas, that's a pity. Chunyi's face was full of regret. She pushed her hand and said, this old woman still wants to participate in the dual cultivation ceremony between you and your junior sister. It seems, Xiaohua rubbed his hands and said with an apologetic smile. However, since seniors think highly of this junior and want to guide this junior, how can this junior not bravely move forward? As long as seniors can take care of this junior will definitely go with you seniors. Wait. Zhu Qinghao waved his hand and said, Xiaohua, tell me if you know how to do it or not. This old man wants to see. If you can't meet this old man's requirements, you still can't go. Senior, please consider. Xiaohua bowed and said, Go. Xie Zhiqian waved his hand and a slender light flashed. A flying sword flew out from his sleeve like a meteor and stabbed towards Xiaohua's throat. Xiaohua was shocked. His body just wanted to dodge, but his heart slightly moved. His whole body flew up and quickly retreated, directly flying out of Linlang Pavilion. However, the more Xiaohua flew, the more he clearly felt that the railing of Linlang Pavilion was behind him, but he couldn't get close. Xie Zhiqian's sword light was like a meteor, closely pressing in front of his eyes. Looking at that posture, it seemed like it wouldn't stop until it pierced his throat. Xiaohua could only use the hibernating thunder escape according to his early foundation establishment cultivation and didn't reveal the slightest bit of his cultivation. However, the sword light in front of him didn't give up and didn't stop at all. Senior Xie, Xiaohua helplessly exclaimed and said, This junior's cultivation can only be like this. Please forgive me. Ha ha, Xie Zhiqian laughed loudly and waved his big sleeve. The sword light circled around Linlang Pavilion and flew back into his hand. He said, Xiaohua, your lightning escape technique is really good. The speed of your flying technique is comparable to this old man's. Xiaohua stopped. He He was still at the railing of Linlang Pavilion and didn't fly out of the river at all. Xiao Hua's face was extremely shocked. He looked around in disbelief and even raised his head to look at the river outside. He praised with admiration, "Villa Master Chun. This junior really doesn't know what to say. This formation is too mystical, isn't it?" Hee. Chun Yi's heart wasn't arrogant at all. However, a trace of complacency flashed across her face, and she said with a smile, "What does a little foundation establishment cultivator like you know? This is nothing more than an insignificant skill." "Admirable, admirable." Xiao Hua smacked his lips and looked at Xie Zhiqian again. He sighed again. Senior Xie's flying sword doesn't seem to be much inferior to a sword cultivator's flying sword, right? Under this flying sword, this junior simply doesn't have the power to fight back. I really can only escape. Moreover, even if I did escape, I wouldn't be able to escape even if I exhausted all the magic power in my body. A core formation cultivator is really unfathomably profound. Unfortunately, this flying sword still can't compare to a sword cultivator. It lacks spirituality. Xie Zhiqian spread out his hand, and a half-foot-long flying sword appeared in his hand. It was covered in flowing light and flying wings. Runes could be faintly seen. It was extremely impressive. "Xiao Hua, your flying speed is indeed not bad. Unfortunately, it still doesn't meet this old man's standards." Zhu Qinghe shook his head, feeling very regretful. "Fellow Taoist Zhu?" Chang Yefeng rushed to speak first. "In my opinion, Xiao Hua is already not bad. I approve of him going." Zhu Qinghe frowned slightly and looked at Chun Yi again. "Fellow Taoist Zhu?" Xiao Hua faced the flying sword and flew with his back facing it. For him to be able to dodge a core formation cultivator's flying sword for such a long time, this method should be the Imperial Thunder Sect's thunder evasion technique. In my opinion, he should be able to go, Chun Yi said with a beaming smile. Zhu Qinghe was helpless. He flicked his sleeve and said, "All right then. Since all the fellow Taoists agree, then this Zhu can only agree." Chapter 1989. Many thanks for Senior Zhu's help. Xiao Hua bowed and said, "All right, Xiao Hua, go back and meditate. Make preparations for your departure. After we discuss it, we will inform you as soon as we have a schedule," Chun Yi instructed. Xiao Hua knew that the four of them were going to discuss something, so he bowed and left. After returning to the pavilion, Xiao Hua sneered. How could he not know? Xie Zhiqian and Chang Yefeng had the lowest cultivation among the four of them. If there were any trivial matters or dangerous things to do, they would definitely go first. Now that Xiao Hua was here, he would be the one probing them. They would be a bit safer. As for Chun Yi, Xiao Hua had already thought it through, so he didn't feel like thinking about it anymore. "You guys can laugh secretly." Xiao Hua secretly said, "I don't know who will have the last laugh. However, this senior Zhu has a good heart. He repeatedly stopped me from going. Unfortunately, he can't stop the other three. I have to give up." Xiao Hua had a good impression of Zhu Qinghe. But where are they going? What treasure are they looking for? How do they know there is skying grass? Knowing the difficulty of this trip, Xiao Hua put all his doubts in the bottom of his heart. Taking advantage of the last bit of leisure, he practiced this soul stab technique to perfection. After another 10 days, Chun Yi came with Chun Kuei to call Xiao Hua. When Xiao Hua arrived in front of the mountain gate of Burial Flower Manor, Zhu Qinghe and the other three were already standing in front. Seeing Xiao Hua come over, Chun Yi asked, "Xiao Hua, are you ready? We're going to leave now. If you regret it, it's not too late. You just have to wait for me in the manor." Junior has already thought it over. Senior Chang is right. Asking for help is better than asking for help. Junior will go with you seniors. I hope you seniors will help me. Xiao Hua bowed and replied, "And since it's like this, let's go." Chun Yi waved her hand, and a mirror-like brilliance flashed in her hand. It quickly rushed into the air, and a ripple of water appeared in front of her. Chun Yi raised her leg, stepped over the water, and disappeared in the air. "Xiao Hua, our trip to that place this time is very secretive. You must pay attention to keeping a secret. Along the way, You must listen to our instructions. You must not send any messages to the outside and reveal our whereabouts, Zhu Qinghe said coldly. If this old master finds anything inappropriate, don't blame this old master for being ruthless. Junior understands. Junior will follow Senior Zhu's words. Xiao Hua was scared and quickly bowed. Zhu Qinghe ignored him and also stepped over the water. Let's go, young man. Xie Zhiqing glanced at Xiao Hua with a smile and then left with Chang Yefeng. Xiao Hua tilted his head slightly and looked at the door of Burial Flower Manor again. He also walked out of the formation. He was a little puzzled in his heart. The beauty retaining grass was poisoned. He didn't know if Chun Yi had found a culprit, but she left Burial Flower Manor so easily. If that person, for example, the Sun Qian that Chun Yi mentioned, came to make trouble again, would Burial Flower Manor be able to withstand it? The more chaotic it is, the better. Xiao Hua curled his lips and acted as if this matter had nothing to do with him. When they came out of the magic array of Burial Flower Manor, there was a flying boat among the flowers and plants. This flying boat was different from the drifting cloud flying boat. There was a bulging part on it like a cabin. Seeing that Chun Yi and others were already standing on it, Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent. He flew up and silently stood beside Xie Zhiqian and was very respectful. We are going to set off. Zhu Qinghe seemed to be talking to himself, but he also seemed to be talking to the others. With a wave of his hand, a multicolored light flew out from his sleeve and landed on the entire airship. The airship suddenly rose up, circled in the air, and then flew toward the east. As the airship ascended into the sky, it gradually became invisible and disappeared. About 1,000 feet away from the flying boat, between a cluster of verdant green leaves, there was a mountain rock that was about 10 feet wide that emitted a faint yellow light. It was like melting snow, and the figure of a cultivator appeared from the mountain rock. As the cultivator took off his cloak, the female cultivator with wrinkled skin and white hair was revealed. She was the Sun Qian that Chun Yi mentioned. Strange. Chun Yi, that slut, actually ignored the safety of Burial Flower Manor and followed a few strange cultivators. That little foundation establishment cultivator also followed them. Sun Qian was very puzzled, and her gaze fell on the magic array of Burial Flower Manor. Could it be that she has something important to do? Or she just set up a trap for this old woman? Alas, it's a pity that this old woman's cultivation and magic arrays is still inferior to Qin Yi's. She already found the only flaw in the magic array of Burial Flower Manor. This time, fortunately, this old woman took advantage of the flaw. Otherwise, with Chun Yi's power, this old woman would have been captured by her. What a pity! Even if this old woman has another chance to go in, whether I can come out is another matter. But this old woman destroyed her beauty-retaining grass. How can she survive in the cultivation world of the country of Shi? Burial Flower Manor will really become the place of burial flower. Sun Qian thought for a moment, but still didn't have the courage to go to Burial Flower Manor. She quietly used the 5 elements escape technique to escape far away. Xiao Hua stood on the flying boat. Seeing the faint brilliance of the flying boat blocking the astral wind in the sky, he was very envious. His flying skill was excellent, but this kind of long-distance travel consumed a lot of spiritual power. It was far less convenient than using a flying magic tool. If he had this flying boat, he would have already arrived at the seaside with Xue Xue, and he wouldn't have encountered so many things. There are quiet rooms on the flying boat. You can each find one to meditate. This trip will only last for a few days. I can control the flying boat alone. Zhu Qinghe stood with his hands in his sleeves and said coldly. It seemed that he still had a grudge against the 3 people who agreed to let Xiao Hua follow them. Well, I still have some magic arts to comprehend, so I won't accompany fellow Zhu. Chun Yi chuckled and went in the cabin first. I'll accompany fellow Zhu for a while. Chang Yefeng said with a smile. I can't do anything in a few days. It's better to chat with fellow Zhu. Xiao Hua, you go and cultivate. Xie Zhiqing glanced at Xiao Hua and said, This trip is very dangerous. If you can improve a little more, you can save your life a little more. Yes, thank you, Senior, for your guidance. Xiao Hua bowed and thanked him. However, this junior wants to ask, where are we going this time? Since we have already set off, can this junior make some preparations? Where? Zhu Qinghe sneered. Mo Zhao Black Forest. Mo Zhao Black Forest? Xiao Hua's face turned slightly pale. Mo Zhao Black Forest was the first dangerous place he heard of. At that time, Ma Qingxing, who was abandoned by heaven, told him that hundreds of individual cultivators in the qi refining stage died at the edge of Mo Zhao Black Forest. They only obtained the remains of a cultivation method and magic weapon, which gave Xiao Hua an extremely dangerous impression. Later, Xiao Hua further learned that Mo Zhao Black Forest was more dangerous than Flame Forest Swamp, Mingxi, Weiming Mountains, and Rising Dawn Mountains. In other places, except for Flame Forest Swamp, Xiao Hua went a little deeper with Zhen Yi and others, and Mingxi went a little deeper with Sun Shu's guidance. The other places were just a little bit outside. The other dangerous places were so dangerous, so Mo Zhao Black Forest was definitely not a good place. According to ordinary cultivators, it was a place where gold core cultivators could enter. What do you think? It's too late to regret now, Zhu Qinghe said mockingly. Chapter 1990. Take a rest first, Chang Yefeng said with a smile. With fellow Taoist Zhu leading the way and us watching over you, you don't have to be afraid. Yes, Junior understands. Xiao Hua's face relaxed slightly as he forced a smile and stepped into the cabin. Inside the cabin, as Zhu Qing has said, there were several small quiet rooms on both sides. Xiao Hua randomly picked a room, opened the restriction, and sat down cross-legged with a calm face as he quietly pondered. After a while, Xiao Hua's eyes lit up as he swept the room with his divine sense. With a wave of his hand, he took out a jade slip. It was the contents of the jade slip he had copied from Zhen Qing. Immediately after, he immersed his divine sense into it and carefully examined it for a long time. A smile appeared on his face, but soon after, he was startled and revealed a trace of astonishment. He immersed his divine sense into the jade slip again and seemed to have discovered something special. Time passed very quickly. Unknowingly, several days had already passed. Xiao Hua had already stored the jade slip into his space. He was still practicing the soul-piercing technique. On this day, the hull of the boat suddenly shook violently. Then it stopped. Have we arrived? Xiao Hua stood up and thought to himself. However, I don't know if this place is close to the place Marshal Uncle Jin gave me. Xiao Hua walked out of the quiet room, but before he could speak, he was stunned by the scene in front of him. The place in front of him was a continuous mountain range. This mountain range was overgrown with forests. It was emerald green, and countless faint clouds lingered on it. It was incomparably beautiful. However, in this place, there were thousands of cultivators who were divided into two groups and confronting each other. Each of them had activated their yellow talismans, magic tools, magic weapons, and other treasures. Not only were there brilliant lights lingering around, but all kinds of sounds were incessant. Both sides were extremely fierce and didn't leave the other side any way out. Screams were accompanied by the sound of magic tools colliding with each other. Bloody light met the light of magic tools, and a tyrannical and terrifying aura filled the entire mountain range. Senior Zhu, what's going on? Xiao Hua asked in a low voice. How would this old master know? Zhu Qinghe scolded angrily. When the airboat was about 10 miles away from here, it was stopped by someone and could neither leave nor move forward. This old man wants to ask about it. Xiao Hua didn't dare to ask again and could only stand next to Xie Zhiqian and watch. Sure enough, there were several golden core cultivators standing in the air 1,000 feet in front of the flying cloud ship. They all held magic treasures in their hands and coldly looked around. There was also a rhombus-shaped flying magic tool several miles away from the flying cloud ship. These cultivators seemed to be disciples of the splendid sect. Chun Yi was experienced and knowledgeable. She said in a low voice, "One of them looks very familiar." I think I've seen him somewhere before. What are the cultivators of the magnificent flower sect doing in the vicinity of Inkcloud Black Forest? Who are their opponents? Zhu Qinghe was somewhat puzzled. His eyes flickered. We just happen to be here. Could it be? As he spoke, he looked at the golden core cultivators in the distance. I'm afraid we won't be able to force our way in. Chang Yefeng smiled bitterly. These people are all at the middle stage of the gold core realm, and the other two are at the late stage of the gold core realm. Motherfucker, these old monsters are about to be pregnant. Why are they still out here? What do they want to do? Boom! There was a loud sound. In a place slightly closer to the flying cloud ship, an early-stage golden core cultivator took out a magic treasure. Countless huge rolling logs flew out from the magic treasure. These rolling logs flashed with a strong green brilliance and smashed towards his opponent. His opponent was holding a flat magic treasure the size of a palm. Drops of true water also flew out from the magic treasure, trying to block the huge logs. However, it was clear that the power of the giant tree was beyond his imagination. The waves formed by the primordial water were smashed into pieces by the giant tree, and he himself was also hit by the giant tree. Although his body flashed with a protective blue light, he was still smashed into a bloody mess and fell from the sky. Strange. Xiao Hua was a little shocked. They're all golden core cultivators. Their magic treasures and magic treasures are not too different. With the protection of the defensive brilliance, it is impossible to kill them directly. How can this splendid sect disciple kill his opponent directly? Could it be that this disciple's cultivation is close to the nascent soul stage? Obviously, Zhu Qinghe and the others also noticed the strange scene. Their faces were very gloomy. Xie Qian smiled bitterly and said, "The splendid sect is indeed a famous sect in the country of Xi. I'm afraid my Immortal Ascension sect is not as good as them." Chang Yefeng didn't say anything, but Chun Yi frowned and looked around as if she was looking for something. Fellow Taoists, secretly release your divine sense. After a moment, Chun Yi whispered, "See if the spiritual energy here is a bit strange." Xiao Huan naturally wouldn't stand out. He quietly watched. Sure enough, after a short while, Zhu Qinghe sneered and said, "It really is slightly strange. The wood element spirit energy of the heavens and the earth here is extraordinarily abundant, and it's simply comparable to an abode. Under such circumstances, how could a water element magic treasure resist a wood element magic treasure? If the splendid sect disciple has a little secret technique, it is not strange that he can directly kill a cultivator of the same cultivation level. But the question is, why is the spiritual energy here so rich? Why does the splendid sect want to kill these opponents?" Chun Yi bit her lips and said, "Moreover, since we have encountered this matter, if it were up to me, those golden core cultivators of the splendid sect should have killed us long ago to prevent this matter from spreading out. But they didn't do it and just didn't allow us to intervene. In other words, they didn't mind us watching. The matter here is really interesting. I'm afraid the splendid sect has taken a fancy to this paradise and wants to drive away the cultivators here." Chang Yefeng didn't know the situation in the country of Xi and guessed. Xie Zhiqian shook his head slightly. "I don't know what kind of sect is here. Although Foundation Establishment cultivators make up the majority, but such a force is definitely not a cultivation family. Spirit Stone Vein." This thought suddenly flashed through Xiao Hua's mind. He had just left Tianmen Mountain and had a deep memory of the rise and fall of Tianmen Mountain's Huang family. It was very easy for him to think of this. Gee, a sharp sound came from a magic treasure in the hand of a splendid sect golden core cultivator who was watching from afar. Following the sound of the golden core cultivator, the disciples of the splendid sect who were fighting withdrew their magic power at the same time and escaped from the battle. They flew back more than 10 feet and then began to fly in different directions. From afar, they looked like scattered but orderly flies. Formation attack. Xiao Hua understood at a glance. He had already seen this formation when he was in Mingxi. Sure enough, in the blink of an eye, several hundred cultivators had already formed a formation in picturesque disorder. Looking at the cultivators on the other side, they were also flustered and impatiently flying in formation. However, compared to the order of the splendid sect, they were still far inferior. "Gee," the golden core cultivator angrily shouted. Following his hand gesture, the magic treasure he took out screeched in the air and rushed into the formation of the cultivators on the other side. At the same time, as if issuing a command, all the disciples of the splendid sect roared in unison. The magic treasures, and yellow talismans in their hands all attacked together. These things actually formed the shape of a fist and attacked the cultivators on the other side in an orderly manner. In contrast to the cultivators of the splendid sect, the cultivators on the other side reacted somewhat hastily and even somewhat disorderly. The magic treasures and other things that were sent flying didn't even reach half of the distance before they were suppressed by the magic power of the fist formed by the magic treasures of the splendid sect. Their speed and power gradually decreased. Good heavens, this is a powerful method. Xiao Hua saw that this method of attack was simply incomparable to the cultivators of Mingxi. He couldn't help but inwardly sigh. If he encountered such a formation in Mingxi, he definitely wouldn't be able to charge through. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The fist knocked down the scattered magic treasures. The cultivators on the other side all fell from the air. Among them, 30% of the cultivators never flew again. The other cultivators scattered like birds and beasts and fled in panic. "Hey, where did this cultivator come from? You dare to bully my fallen deer mountain?" With a roar, a rainbow-like brilliance flew over from the distance. However, when the brilliance dissipated, a middle-stage golden core old man with disheveled hair and a red face appeared. He looked at the several golden core cultivators on Xiao Hua's side in astonishment. Clearly, he didn't notice these people with his divine sense. Fellow Taoist Kong?" The old man's eyes were somewhat alarmed. He stared at one of the golden core cultivators and asked in disbelief, "Why does your splendid sect covet my fallen deer mountain's foundation?" "Fellow Taoist Ming." The so-called fellow Taoist Kong unhurriedly took several steps forward and sneered, "I didn't expect you to remember me after meeting me in Flame Forest Swamp. However, since you and I are fated to meet, I'll give you a word of advice. The Spirit Stone Mine in Liaoming Mountain Range already belongs to my splendid sect. If fellow Taoist Ming is tactful, I won't be ruthless. Take these fallen deer mountain disciples and quickly leave. Liaoming Mountain Range is my fallen deer mountain's foundation. How can you give it away just because of a few words from your splendid sect?" The cultivator, surnamed Ming, was somewhat indignant and unwilling. "Fellow Taoist Ming, whether you leave or not is up to you. That's all I have to say." The cultivator, surnamed Kong, ignored him and retreated with a flick of his sleeve. The cultivator, surnamed Ming's eyes narrowed. He looked at the golden core cultivators on guard, and then looked at the fleeing fallen deer mountain disciples who were looking at him in an extremely sorry state. He sighed and turned his head. Once again, he transformed into a rainbow and quickly flew in the direction he came from. The other fallen deer mountain disciples also flew up and followed behind the cultivator, surnamed Ming. However, many of them were unwilling to give up and look back. The weak are prey to the strong. This was the only thought in Xiao Hua's mind. Spirit Stone Mine? The fallen deer mountain cultivator's voice wasn't soft. Chen Yi, Zhu Chengha, and the others also heard him. They looked at each other with shock and even greed on their faces. Soon after, the several hundred splendid sect disciples landed in the mountain range and disappeared. The cultivators blocking the flying ship also left without paying any attention to Zhu Qinghe and the others. Chapter 1991. How could Shanghua sect forcibly occupy Deer Descent Mountain's Spirit Stone Vein? The flying boat flew for a long time before everyone finally calmed down. Although the battle just now was not too big, the situation was really strange. Zhu Qinghe unconsciously frowned and looked at Chun Yi. Indeed, the spirit stone vein in the country of Shi is so small that it has long been controlled by various large sections. Moreover, for hundreds of thousands of years, a kind of balance has been formed. Shanghua sect is not likely to act rashly. Chun Yi was also puzzled. I'm afraid Shanghua sect is coveting Deer Descent Mountain? Chang Yefeng asked hesitantly. Impossible. If Shanghua sect wants to annex Deer Descent Mountain, Xuanyin School and Qiqiao sect will be the first to disagree. Chun Yi shook her head. Moreover, Shanghua sect did not kill the disciples of Deer Descent Mountain. Even that cultivator surnamed Ming was released by Shanghua sect. It seems like their target is the Spirit Stone vein. Snatching the Spirit Stone vein will definitely cause an imbalance between the three cultivation sects in the country of Shi. Zhu Qinghe said curiously, Shanghua sect is drinking poison to quench their thirst. Not necessarily. Chun Yi sneered. She looked at the darkness far away from the astral winds. Perhaps other sects have the same idea. Zhu Qinghe and the others were not as confused as Xiaohua. Even Chang Yefeng and Xie Zhiqian understood something from this sentence. They were shocked and secretly cried out in their hearts. Then they fell silent, as if thinking about something. Xiaohua could not think of too many disputes. Seeing that the four of them were silent, he did not ask anything. He only thought about how to protect himself when he reached Inkcloud Black Forest. Several hours later, the darkness in the distance was getting closer. Xiaohua could see clearly that the darkness did not only cover the mountain rocks and trees, but also the air was faintly filled with a black fog. Even the sunlight that shone into the depths of Inkcloud Black Forest reflected a faint black light. A kind of solemnity, a kind of sadness, a kind of fear, and even a kind of fear quietly emerged from the bottom of Xiaohua's heart. Fellow Zhu, we are about to reach the Ink-Zhao Black Forest. Are we going to enter from the edge? Chun Yi's expression had returned to normal as she asked with a smile. What can we do if we don't enter from the edge? Zhu Qinghe smiled bitterly. If Manor Head Chun has a shortcut, that would be the best. You don't say. I do have a small secret path. Chun Yi pursed her lips and smiled. Really? Zhu Qinghe was overjoyed. He clapped his hands and said, I'm afraid the edge of the Inkcloud Black Forest is hundreds of miles long, and there are dangers lurking everywhere. Although it's nothing for Gold Core Realm practitioners like us, it's still troublesome. If Manor Head Chun has a shortcut to enter the forest, it's great that we can concentrate on dealing with the dangers inside. What about my share? Can I have an extra portion? Chun Yi widened her eyes and asked with watery eyes. Manor Lord Chun, why didn't you tell me earlier that you have a secret path in an Inkcloud Black Forest? Chang Yefeng was a little displeased. We've already discussed all the details. Isn't it a little too much for the Manor Lord to suddenly make a request when we're already here? Is that so? Forget it. Chun Yi was not angry. She smiled and said, Fellow Zhu didn't mention it at that time, and I didn't think about it. Now I just remembered that if Fellow Zhu doesn't agree, we'll follow Fellow Zhu and enter the forest according to the route he took last time. How about this? Zhu Qinghe thought for a while and said, Last time I entered the edge of the Inkcloud Black Forest, it took me a lot of effort. Now that there are more people, it will be more troublesome. Since I asked too little, I'll give half of my share to Manor Head Chun. What do you think? That's great. Chun Yi wasn't courteous and agreed with a smile, and then she clapped her hand and took out a crystalline jade spoon before she said to Zhu Qinghe, Fellow Taoist Zhu, stop the flying boat. I'll find the location of the secret path. When Zhu Qinghe stopped the flying boat, everyone got out of the flying boat. They saw Chun Yi's hands forming a wonderful incantation. Every finger seemed to be dancing beautifully. As the spiritual power passed, the jade spoon turned into a woman less than 3 inches tall, wearing a seamless heavenly robe. The woman's eyebrows were clear, and her skin was as white as snow. Her figure flew with the brilliance, fluttering her sleeves as she flew toward the dark place in the distance. Her speed was not inferior to a cultivator at the middle stage of foundation establishment. Let's go. Seeing Jade Maiden fly, countless lights scattered in the air and turned into specks of flowers, Chun-Yi revealed a smile. Her figure was actually the same as Jade Maiden's. She waved her Taoist robe and chased after her. Let's go. Zhu Qinghe looked at Chun-Yi's narcissistic appearance and slightly shook his head. He waved his sleeves and led everyone to fly down. Xiaohua leisurely followed beside Xie Zhiqian. He slightly released his Buddhist sense and carefully guarded against everything in the vicinity. Hearing Chun-Yi's words, Zhu Qinghe and others arranged everything. The division of the four people was also completely agreed. Only the heavenly grass was left for Xiaohua. As the Jade Girl flew closer to the ink Zhao Black Forest, Xiaohua felt his eyes gradually darkening. Although the sun was really high up in the sky, there seemed to be something in the sky near the ink Zhao Black Forest that could not pass through light. It could even be said that it was something that could absorb light, blocking the light. But Xiaohua carefully examined it. Not only his divine sense, but also his Buddhist sense could not see anything. Even if he used his Dharma eye to examine it, he could only see a little bit of dark thing. It was exactly the same as what he saw with his naked eyes. After a while, Xiaohua felt somewhat strange. Usually, his true essence flowed smoothly in his meridians, but here, his true essence was unexpectedly somewhat obscure. It was as if sand was mixed in the river. Although it did not affect the river water, it always had a kind of heavy feeling. No wonder only foundation establishment and golden core cultivators can come to the ink Zhao Black Forest. Xiaohua somewhat understood. Qi refining cultivators' meridians are filled with true qi. When these black things enter the body, it is like a huge rock blocking the true qi, affecting the use of magic power. And in the body of foundation establishment cultivators, it can only be treated as gravel. As for golden core cultivators, all of their magic power is in the golden core. These black things may not necessarily enter the body. However, Xiaohua's true essence was originally filled with many black spots of earth crystal Yao milk. When these inexplicable things entered his meridians, it only made Xiaohua somewhat obscure. It actually did not have any effect. Even these black spots were absorbed by the earth crystal Yao milk, increasing little by little. Fellow Taoist Jew, it should be here. When the Jade Girl flew to a certain distance from the ink Zhao Black Forest, it stopped. It hovered in the air and did not move forward. Chun-Yi covered it with her sleeve, and the Jade Girl turned back into a jade spoon and fell in her hand. Chapter 1992. This place doesn't look any different. Xiao Huayu looked around and saw that the coarse soil was suffused with a dim light. Lo, clawing vines clung tightly to the ground. The thumb-sized leaves on them were uneven, and there were all kinds of shapes. The thick trees in front of them were so thick that several people could wrap their arms around them. The trees were not perfectly straight. Some were twisted, some were slanted, and the branches were crisscrossed. Strange birdsong could be heard from the sides or in front of them, rising and falling one after another. Suddenly, there was the sound of wind, lifting up the branches and leaves, making one feel a chill. Zhu Qinghe clapped his hands, and a green light flew out from his storage bag. It was a palm-sized jade flask. Under the activation of his dermic powers, the jade flask spewed out a silvery white light. The light was like a fountain that poured down from the top of Zhu Qinghe's head, protecting him. Xiaohua could clearly see that the light was slightly wrinkled and reflected light. It was actually in the form of granules, which seemed to be able to block out the black things in the ink Zhao Black Forest. Xiaohua, the ink sand in the ink Zhao Black Forest is very strange. The deeper you go, the more there are. Not only does the ink sand drill into your meridians, but it can also block the circulation of true essence and even corrode it. It also seeps into your meridians, making your entire body heavier. In the end, your entire body won't be able to move. Xie Zhiqian reminded Xiaohua from the side, normal protective light can't block the ink sand. You're a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect, so if you're not of the lightning attribute, then you're the fire attribute. If you release your protective lightning or fire, it should be effective. As he spoke, Xie Zhiqian also clapped his hand, and a strange magic tool that looked like a gourd appeared. A layer of faint, flame-like spirit light protected Xie Zhiqian. Seeing everyone take out their methods, Xiao Hua felt bitter. He only knew that he was coming to the Ink Zhao Black Forest on the flying boat, so he didn't make any preparations. In the Burial Flower Manor, there was clearly time to explain, but no one said a word to him. Now that he was here, they wanted him to take out his methods. It was clearly bullying. Gidge Chun-Yi was wearing a tricolored robe, and the cloud-like mist enveloped her inside. She flew to Xiao Hua's side and said with a smile, "Xiao Hua, it's not that I don't want to remind you, but I thought that this place was hidden and I couldn't let you out of Burial Flower Manor. Since you can't go out, what's the use of telling you? If you have any tricks up your sleeve, use them for now. Otherwise, I have a Yusha that can block Emo Sha as well." After saying that, Chun-Yi took out a thin robe and handed it to Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua knew that since a golden core cultivator had to take out a magic weapon to protect himself seriously, his own flame might not necessarily be of use. Thus, he didn't hold back and reached out to grab the silk cloth and put it on with a flip of his hand. He saw that the silk cloth was thin and tight, producing a faint brilliance that blocked the ink sand, making it seem as if he wasn't wearing it at all. "Thank you, Manor Lord Chun." Xiao Hua bows and says, "Kid, I really don't have any protective magic treasures here. Yes, just remember it in your heart." Chun-Yi smiled and looked into the ink shadow black forest. "Manor Lord Chun, please lead the way," Zhu Qinghe said in a low voice after releasing his divine sense and looking for a moment. Chun didn't hold back and waved her hand, saying, "Fellow cultivators, please follow me." Then, as if to remind them, she says, "This secret path was discovered by a fellow cultivator by chance. He just told me the general direction and route. This is the first time I've entered it. The secret path is about 100 feet from the ground and about 10 feet in radius. If your divine sense is strong enough, you should be able to find some clues. However, although there is a secret path and we can fly in it, we'd better not go too fast. It is said that the outer diameter of the secret path is very thin. If we attract too much spiritual chi of heaven and earth, the secret path will be destroyed." "What? We can fly in the secret path? We can't fly outside?" Xiao Hua is a little surprised and looks at the dark forest in the distance. The Mo Sha can enter the meridians with the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. Although the Mo Sha disappears after leaving the ink shadow black forest, it is obvious that the magic power of ordinary cultivators is greatly reduced in the ink shadow black forest. No wonder ordinary cultivators can't enter it. As for those rogue cultivators, they can only swim in the periphery. While Xiao Hua is thinking, he has already followed Xie Zhiqian into the ink shadow black forest for more than 100 feet. Xiao Hua has a feeling that he is trying to escape through the sand. A faintly discernible repelling force is produced, as if it is trying to squeeze him out of the ink shadow black forest. When no one was paying attention, Xiao Hua opened his Dharma eyes. Just as Chun-Yi had said, the black sand around them was much lighter. It looked like a passageway about 30 meters above the ground. The edges of the passageway swayed slightly, like seaweed swaying in the water. "Motherfucker, how were these passageways discovered? Do other people have the same Dharma eyes as I do?" Xiao Hua is a little speechless. After flying for another hour, because they are not flying fast and the passage is not leading directly to the inside of the ink shadow black forest, there are some twists and turns like a small path in the forest. Although it leads to a secluded place, it is still a winding path. "Fellow Zhu, don't worry. Although we can fly in this secret passage, it seems to be a little long," Chun-Yi said in a low voice. Her voice is very loud in the dark, and the crisp chirps in the surroundings are much fainter now, indicating that they have entered the depths of the ink shadow black forest. "Well, it's not bad," Zhu Qinghe said with a smile. "Although I went in directly last time, I didn't fly so fast or so easily, and I used a lot of magic power. Although this secret passage is a long detour, it is better in that it is easy. Alas, if I came to the ink shadow black forest alone, even if I know that the Sword of Mortal's remains are inside, I may not dare to break into the inner layer of the ink shadow black forest. Chang Yefeng sighed in a low voice. The Sword of Mortal's remains? Xiao Hua's body trembles, and his eyes are filled with disbelief, looking at Xie Zhiqian beside him. Xie Zhiqian coughed and said in a low voice, "Fellow Chang, you should be careful with your words. We are already at the edge of the ink shadow black forest. Even if Xiao Hua wants to leave, he needs to have the courage to do so." Chang Yefeng sneered. "Even if he wants to leave, can I let him leave at will?" Well, since we are here, I guess fellow Chang also has doubts in your heart. And you want me to explain the reason? Zhu Qinghe understood Chang Yefeng's meaning and thought that Xiao Hua didn't know the truth, so he nodded slightly and said. Then he looked at the darkness in the distance and said, "Since Manor Lord Chun found this secret passage, and we have some free time, let's just kill some time. I will tell you everything, so that you won't be confused." "Senior Zhu, thank you for your explanation," Xiao Hua said respectfully. "This junior is indeed confused, and I don't know why you came to this dangerous place. Of course, if you don't want to tell me, this junior will just follow you inside." I didn't tell you before because this matter is too secretive and has something to do with our cultivation. If others knew, especially the cultivators of the Seven Skills sect who use flying swords, I'm afraid we wouldn't have a chance," Zhu Qinghe said with a smile. "On the contrary, I know that not many of the cultivators of your Imperial Thunder sect are good at using flying swords, so I'm not afraid to tell you. This is why I agreed to let you come." TCH, Xiao Hua despised him in his heart. If Chun Yi and the others didn't have ulterior motives, Zhu Qinghe wouldn't have let him come. However, without waiting for Xiao Hua to speak, Zhu Qinghe said, "Xiao Hua, do you know about sword cultivators?" Xiao Hua rolled his eyes and shook his head slightly. "This junior was previously a loose cultivator in my country of Shi. My cultivation was very shallow, and my knowledge was also very limited. I only wanted to cultivate to the 10th layer of Qi, refining, and enter a cultivation sect. In fact, this junior always wanted to enter the Huanhua sect, but who knew that I would enter the Imperial Thunder sect by accident? However, after entering the Imperial Thunder sect, I discovered that the cultivation sect wasn't a pure land, so this junior buried himself in cultivation. Now that I finally reached Foundation Establishment, I have the opportunity to come out and experience the world. I won't hide it from Senior. Presumably, Senior also knows about this junior's junior sister's matter. This junior only cares about matters related to himself, so this junior doesn't know much about sword cultivators." Seeing Xiao Hua's sincere words, as if he was confessing, Zhu Qinghe smiled and nodded. He didn't comment and said, "That day, when fellow Taoist Xie tested your sword light, did you know? Isn't that a flying sword?" This junior naturally knows. Xiao Hua admitted honestly. This junior used a flying sword talisman when I was Qi refining, and there's also a flying sword talisman in my storage pouch. As he spoke, Xiao Hua clapped his hands, as if he was going to take out a flying sword talisman from his storage pouch. There's no need," Zhu Qinghe said with a smile. "The flying sword talisman is only a yellow talisman. It can't be compared to a real flying sword, let alone a spirit sword." "Yes, please dispel my doubts, Senior Zhu," Xiao Hua replied in a well-behaved manner. "Actually, on my Xiaoyu continent, beside Taoist techniques, there are also sword cultivators, soul cultivators, beast cultivators, and so on," Zhu Qinghe said in a low voice. "Xiao Hua, could it be that your master didn't tell you about it?" Zhu Qinghe suddenly asked, causing Xiao Hua to be stunned. He slightly opened his mouth and said awkwardly, "This junior also asked about it before I reached Foundation Establishment, but my master said that I only needed to know and cultivate well. First, I had to reach Foundation Establishment, and then I wouldn't ask about anything else." When this junior reached Foundation Establishment, he wanted to introduce this junior to the senior sisters of the Imperial Thunder sect. Why didn't this junior just escape? At this point, Xiao Hua's heart trembled, and his forehead was almost covered in sweat. That day, he had told Chun Yi about the Feather Immortal Assembly at the Burial Flower Manor, but he didn't seem to have mentioned the matter of Zhang Yuhe and Zhang Yutong. Xiao Hua's eyes turned rapidly, and he repeatedly thought about it. Seeing that Chun Yi's flying figure didn't change, he finally relaxed. What a sentimental person. Zhu Qinghe glanced at Chun Yi and said, "Sword cultivators are sword cultivators. All of their techniques are related to a flying sword." Then, Zhu Qinghe roughly explained the matter of sword cultivators and finally said, "Actually, sword cultivators and Taoist techniques aren't completely separated. Within my Dao sect, there are also many cultivators whose magic tools or magic treasures are flying swords. For example, fellow Taoist Xie, fellow Taoist Chong, and I. Moreover, my Dao sect's flying sword technique isn't inferior to sword cultivators' flying swords. Even as early as hundreds of thousands of years ago, there were nascent soul stage experts who went to the Huan country to challenge sword cultivators. Chapter 1993. Huan Country. Xiao Hua pretended to be confused. The three cultivation countries are Shi, Ming, and Lian. This Huan Country is the land of sword cultivators. Zhu Qinghe glared at Xiao Hua and muttered, "Which pedantic foundation establishment cultivator is your master? He didn't even tell you this. No wonder he can only be a foundation establishment cultivator." He. Xiao Hua didn't dare to say more and simply pretended to be ignorant. "That cultivator from my Dao sect is very powerful with his flying sword. He actually won all 9 battles in Huan Country and returned victorious." Zhu Qinghe said proudly. "Oh, really?" This was the first time Xiao Hua heard of this. He was shocked. If he defeated a sword cultivator with a Dao technique, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, he actually won with a flying sword. This was a disgrace to sword cultivators. "Which sect is this senior from? He's so powerful," Xiao Hua asked. "Which sect can he be from?" Zhu Qinghe sighed. "Seven Skills Sect," Xiao Hua said without hesitation. Zhu Qinghe glared at him and said, "Do you think only your Shi country's 7 Skills Sect knows about flying swords?" I'm just a frog in a well. Senior, please enlighten me." Xiao Hua scratched his head and said embarrassedly, "It's Ming Country's Changbai sect." Chun Yi said clearly, 7 Skills Sect's flying sword is only because the current sect master, Lu and I, is good at it. Therefore, many disciples cultivate flying swords. However, Changbai sect is established with flying swords. Other Dao techniques are just vassals. So it's like that. Xiao Hua easily thought of Lu Weigang, the Qi refinement disciple who used a flying sword to chase after Sun Shu during the Feather Immortal Gathering. He thought, no wonder. Yes, it's Changbai sect from Ming Country. Zhu Qinghe nodded and said, that senior's name is Reverend Brightsword. He should have been an early nascent soul cultivator at that time. Senior Zhu, did you come to Mo Zhao Black Forest to find the remains of Reverend Brightsword? Xiao Hua asked curiously. Don't worry. Zhu Qinghe smiled and said, after Reverend Brightsword returned from Huan Country, he became famous in Ming Country and became the next leader of Changbai sect. As for the Huan Kingdom's sword cultivators, they were dejected. Many people began to have doubts about sword cultivators. Of course, Huan Country also has spiritual sword and divine sword swordsmen. They can't possibly attack Reverend Brightsword who has a low cultivation level, so they can only think of other methods. However, Reverend Brightsword is indeed powerful. Not only are first-grade sword transformation stage cultivators unable to be his match, even in the final battle against a second-grade sword transformation stage cultivator, who is equivalent to a mid-Yuanying stage cultivator, he was still slightly superior. In an instant, he broke the myth that a sword cultivator's attack power is stronger than a Dao cultivator of the same level. However, it's not like Huan Country doesn't have any geniuses. At that time, there was a rising star in Huan Country called Li Xiubai. His cultivation was similar to Reverend Brightsword's, and he was also a first-grade sword transformation realm cultivator. This Li Xiaobai's innate talent is unrivaled. Since he was young, he had spiritual energy and perseverance. Others only nurture one sword pill. Some extremely powerful ones only nurture 3 at most. They're called the 3 stars glorious sun, but he actually nurtured 9 sword pills in one go. 9. Xiaohua almost cried out in surprise. Wasn't this number the 9 shattered sword pellets he obtained from the deafening Thunder Palace? What's wrong? Seeing Xiaohua's strange expression, Zhu Qinghe asked curiously. AI, this sword cultivator senior. If my master was here, he would definitely reprimand him. Biting off more than you can chew. Xiaohua had a bitter smile on his face. He said empathetically, others cultivating 3 is already the limit, but he actually wants to cultivate 9. This is really beyond this junior's expectations. However, since senior said so, Senior Li Xiaobai's 9 flying swords must have been cultivated. This kind of rare genius, this junior, really can't imagine. Not only you, even I find it hard to understand. Zhu Qinghe sneered. Other people's 3 sword pills are 3 stars glorious sun, but his 9 sword pills are transit of the sun, 9 stars transit of the sun. That's an extremely high realm among sword cultivators. It's the legendary divine sword realm's sword immortal. Since childhood, Li Xiaobai's goal was to cultivate to the divine sword realm and become a sword immortal. Chun Yi's face was filled with longing as she said, moreover, under his tenacious nature, under his heaven-gifted genius, those 9 sword pills were born by him one by one. He named them Fledgling Star, Morning Star, Emblem Star, Brilliant Star, Dual Star, Dark Star, Star Destroyer, Star Extinction, and Star Creation. AI, heaven knows, it's already difficult for a sword cultivator to control 3 flying swords. How could he control 9 great spirit swords? That's right, Reverend Brightsword went to Huan country to challenge Li Xiaobai. Unfortunately, he went at the wrong time. Li Xiaobai actually went to Million Mountains to train. He didn't meet Reverend Brightsword. Zhu Qinghe continued. When he returned to Flame Bamboo Sword Sect and learned about Reverend Brightsword, he was extremely angry and immediately came to Meng country to challenge Reverend Brightsword at Changbai Sect. Good, Xiaohua's eyes flashed with a trace of brilliance as he praised. That will definitely be a battle that will shock the entire Xiaoyu continent. That's right. At that time, the cultivators of the 3 cultivation countries all heard the news and immediately moved. They wanted to see this battle of sword and Dao that is hard to come by in tens of thousands of years. Zhu Qinghe's face was also filled with longing as he said, all the big sects, big clans, and many famous cities were all eagerly waiting for news about the time and location of the battle to come. Unfortunately, Li Xiaobai aggressively went to Ming country and even rushed to Changbai Sect. However, Reverend Bright's Sword Changbai Sect treated Li Xiaobai with respect and was very humble. However, once Li Xiaobai entered Changbai Sect, there was no more news, as if he didn't even appear. Chun Yi said softly in front of them. Until half a year later, Reverend Brightsword and Li Xiaobai announced to the world on Changbai Peak that the 2 of them agreed to duel in a secret place. Moreover, they agreed to never announce the result of the duel to the public. At that time, whether it was the 3 cultivation countries or Huan country, all the sword cultivators were in an uproar. Huan country's Flame Bamboo Sword Sect even sent an elder to Changbai Sect in Ming country, as if to urge Senior Li Xiaobai. Zhu Qinghe's face was filled with reminiscence as he said, however, when the Flame Bamboo Sword Sect's elder came to Changbai Sect, Reverend Brightsword and Li Xiaobai were both gone. Li Xiaobai left a jade slip and said that he was going to duel with Reverend Brightsword. As for where he went, Changbai Sect master and elders also didn't know. Flame Bamboo Sword Sect originally thought that Li Xiaobai had been used a secret technique by Changbai Sect, but when they saw Li Xiaobai's jade slip, they naturally had nothing to say and could only wait on Changbai Peak. This wait lasted for another half a year. Zhu Qinghe sighed and said, until one day, Reverend Bright's sword's disciple saw that there was some movement in the sect's messaging secret array. After recognizing that it was Reverend Bright's sword who sent the message, he immediately informed the sect master and Flame Bamboo Sword sect's elder. At this time, Reverend Bright's sword's life tablet in Changbai sect was also damaged. When Changbai sect's sect master and Flame Bamboo Sword sect's elder saw Reverend Bright sword's nascent soul image transmission, they knew that the duel had already ended. Reverend Bright's sword really kept his promise and didn't say a word about the result of the duel. He only arranged some matters in the sect and then turned off the image transmission. Chapter 1994. However, Immortal Bright Sword's natal spiritual tablet was damaged, indicating that he had died. Even his nascent soul could not escape. At first, the elder of Flame Bamboo Sword sect thought that Li Xiaobai could win, but after waiting for a long time, Li Xiaobai did not return, so he hurried back to Huan country. It is said that Li Xiaobai's natal spiritual tablet also had a crack. The two of them actually perished together. Immortal Bright Sword's last words were not completely spread, but there was a sentence that all the sword cultivators in Meng country knew. Without waiting for Zhu Qinghe to finish, Chang Yefeng and Xie Zhiqian both said in unison, Sword Dao has no regrets. Yes, it is this sentence. Zhu Qinghe nodded. Although our Taoist sect uses flying swords as magic tools, unlike sword cultivators who use their lives to nurture their swords, they still use their swords as their lives. Immortal Bright Sword's sentence really hit the bottom of my heart. Yes, for this battle, all the sects have their own guesses, and there are records in their own ancient books. Chang Yefeng nodded. But what actually happened, no one knows. In order to find the truth, all the sects sent out their forces, first in Ming country, then in Shi country and Lian country, and even in Huan country. We didn't find any trace of it. Zhu Qinghe said again, however, in the end, the head of Changbai sect found clues from Immortal Bright Sword's nascent soul and concluded that it wasn't Shi country's Mo Zhao Black Forest. It may even be in the core. So, Changbai sect secretly searched Mo Zhao Black Forest and lost a lot of experts, but still found no trace. Later, this news was discovered by some people, and it was completely leaked, attracting many sword cultivators to come here to search. What was the result? Xiao Hua suddenly asked a seemingly extremely stupid question. Chun Yi said with a smile, if they found it, why would we come here today? Xiao Hua said with a smile, what I mean is Mo Zhao Black Forest is so big, and there are thousands of cultivators in Shi country. How could they not find it? Even if Mo Zhao Black Forest is dangerous, what about Funshin stage seniors? What about Deshang stage seniors? Can't you just ask any one of them? Ha, little friend Xiao, you still don't understand. Xie Zhiqian smiled and said, I heard that there's a famous rogue cultivator in your country of Shi. I think he's called Old Man Baijiang. His cultivation technique can be cultivated to the foundation establishment stage, which is a great temptation to rogue cultivators. Many rogue cultivators are looking for him. You must have had such a plan back then, right? But if the current you were to ask you to search for his orthodoxy, would you go? Yes, I understand. Xiao Hua nodded. Daoist Master Bright Sword and Li Xiaobai are indeed handsome for a while and can be considered world-shaking. But in front of these seniors, they are still nothing. Yes, that's one thing, Zhu Qinghe said with a smile. On the other hand, in the three kingdoms of cultivation, Daoist magic cultivation is still the priority. There are few cultivators who practice flying swords, so no one will invest more in the whereabouts of these two people. Enlightened Master Bright Sword's orthodoxy was in the Changbai sect. Li Xiaobai's orthodoxy was also in the Flame Bamboo Sword sect. What he needed to find was Reverend Bright Sword's long sword and Li Xiaobai's 9 stars transit. However, since the two of them had already perished together, their flying swords might not be intact. Even if they were found, it would be useless for sword transformation swordsmen and nascent soul cultivators. Understand, Xiao Huan nodded and said, For seniors are looking for these 10 flying swords, as well as the remains of the 2 seniors and their storage bags. Yes, for us Golden Core cultivators, these things are the most attractive. Zhu Qinghe did not hide it and nodded. If we can obtain their legacy, it will be extremely useful for us to break through to the nascent soul realm. It might even be our only chance. Then, Zhu Qinghe glanced at Chang Yefeng and said, although the various sects have their own guesses and have their own opinions about the place of their duel, they have overlooked one point. This is also something that I suddenly realized when I saw that place. What point? Chang Yefeng asked. That's right. Fellow Taoist Zhu, what point is it? Xie Qian was also eager to know. After all, he also did not understand how Zhu Chenghe could know about such a secret place. Hee, I'll keep you in suspense for now. Zhu Qinghe laughed and said, when you see it, you will naturally understand. At that time, I didn't think too much about it until I saw the strange scene there. However, it was also because of this that I felt that I didn't have much confidence in breaking in, so I retreated to find the 3 of you to help me. Then he glanced at Xiao Hua and said, I didn't see the heavenly Yin grass, but according to my guess and the sect's records, it should be there in that environment. Yes, I hope Senior's guess is correct. At this time, Xiao Hua's heart was far less bitter than before. Since he knew that Zhu Qinghe and the others were looking for 10 flying swords, and that it was related to sword cultivation, Xiao Hua was already eager to try. Even if there was no heavenly Yin grass, this trip might still have a harvest. The heavenly Yin grass's nature is neutral. Its nature is neutral and yin and yang. Chun Yi was very familiar with spiritual herbs and whispered, "Ooh!" At this time, a divine sense swept over from afar, sweeping past everyone and immediately locking them. Zhu Chenghe was extremely embarrassed and angry, and with a light rebuke, his divine sense also rushed out. Fellow Taoist, help me. A slightly old voice transmitted from where the divine sense swept over, and the tone was very anxious. This is bad. Zhu Qinghe's divine sense swept over and immediately knew the origin of the matter. His face was slightly shocked, and he whispered, "This is that shameless cultivator. He couldn't get rid of Mo Zhao himself, so he actually led him to us. Quickly get out. Don't let that guy find out about the secret passage here." Chun Yi's divine sense was not inferior to Zhu Qinghe's, and she immediately urged. Xiao Hua and the others didn't dare to be negligent, and they quickly followed Zhu Chenghe out of the secret passage. Just as they escaped the range of the secret passage, Xiao Hua felt a kind of pressure on his body, forcing him to land on the ground. Moreover, a thick black thing rushed towards his body like a swarm of bees, and the Yu Sha could only block a small part of it. Looking at Chun Yi and the others again, their bodies were flashing with light, as if the light around them was blocking the black thing around them, and they were still flying about 10 feet away. "Xiao Hua, can you fly?" Xie Qian asked. "This is really strange. This is only the edge of the ink Zhao Black Forest. How did Mo Zhao fly out from the middle to the outside?" "Junior can fly, but it consumes a lot of magic power," Xiao Hua said with a wry smile. "Junior had better try his best to fly below, and I hope to get rid of this trouble as soon as possible. Let's go. We'll go and meet him." Zhu Chenghe waved his hand and said, "Yes." Chang Yefeng and the others responded, and they all flew up. Xiao Hua didn't dare to release his Buddhist consciousness, and his divine sense was obviously limited in the ink Zhao Black Forest, so he naturally had to hide his strength. After flying for a few miles, Zhu Qinghe waved his hand, and Chun Yi and the others hid on a tall black tree, while Xiao Hua half flew and half crawled on a black tree. Roar! A roar that sounded like a dragon's roar and a wolf's howl could be heard from a few miles away. The voice of the cultivator who was running for his life could also be heard. "My fellow cultivators, there are 2 Mo Zhao behind me. I only came here because I had no other choice. If you help me kill these 2 Mo Zhao, I won't take anything from you. In fact, I would like to thank you for your help." Zhu Qinghe snorted and didn't answer. In less than half a cup of tea's time, waves of black waves rose up in front of them, and the black thing unique to the ink Zhao Black Forest was thrown into the air as if it was swept up by a hurricane. The Black Forest, which looked calm just a moment ago, was now swaying from side to side, as if it was split by a huge wave. Xiao Hua could even hear the sound of trees falling to the ground in the distance. Hiss! When a cultivator in a light green robe flew over, Xiao Hua saw the Mo Zhao that was chasing the cultivator, and he couldn't help but gasp. The Mo Zhao was as black as its name. Its whole body was pitch black, and it was even darker than the black trees around it. Moreover, there was a kind of glossy gloss in the darkness, and it was obvious that the skin of the Mo Zhao was extremely hard. Moreover, the Mo Zhao was 30 feet long and 3 feet thick. Its body was like a black snake, but it was different from a black snake. The front part of the Mo Zhao's head had an additional membrane, and there were bony forks protruding from the membrane. At this time, it was swaying back and forth as if it was angry. The other parts of the Mo Zhao's head were similar to a snake's head, but its fangs were protruding out, and its fist-sized eyes were flashing with red light. Looking at the tail of the Mo Zhao, it was indeed similar to a python's. It was slightly thick, and it was in the shape of a fish's fin. What surprised Xiao Hua the most was that there was a pair of 1-foot-long wings in the middle of the Mo Zhao's body. At this time, it was flapping up and down, and a strong wind was stirring up above the pitch-black membrane. It was somewhat similar to the wings of a thunder beast. Roar! The Mo Zhao in front roared angrily, and its tail swayed violently, hitting the black trees around it. The extremely hard black trees were like firewood in the face of the Mo Zhao's tail, and they were easily overturned. The Mo Zhao flew into the air, and with the flap of its wings, it flew far away. Tsk. Xiao Hua was very impressed. He thought to himself, this Mo Zhao is indeed a natural spiritual creature. Mo Zhao Black Forest. Mo Zhao Black Forest. This is the nest of the Mo Zhao. I don't know what kind of amazing magical powers it has. Just as Xiao Hua thought to himself, Mo Zhao, who was tailing them, also roared and raised his head high. Then, he suddenly stretched his head forward and spat out a swirling mass of black gas, which shot straight at the cultivator who was fleeing in front of him. Oh my, it's so powerful! Xiao Hua's divine thoughts swept through the area, and he could see clearly that the pitch-black mass of air was not only condensed by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, but more importantly, the special black thing in the Mo Zhao Black Forest had filled the entire mass of air. Moreover, balls of different sizes were condensed in the mass of air, colliding and rotating with each other. Xiao Hua's divine thoughts seemed to be attracted by the black thing in the mass of air. Chapter 1995. When the cultivator who was being chased saw Mo Zhao spit out a strange mass of black gas, his expression changed drastically. He hurriedly waved his hand, and a magic treasure that looked like a lotus flew out of his hand. It turned into a tricolored arc that protected his back. However, as soon as the magic treasure left his hand, the black things in the surroundings swarmed toward it as if they were attracted to it. In just a moment, the tricolored arc absorbed a lot of the black things, and its brilliance became somewhat dim. Mo Zhao's mass of black gas was like a fish swimming in the dark forest, and it quickly dived into the tricolored arc. With a loud bang, the tricolored arc collided with the mass of black gas, and a huge force stretched the arc extremely long. With another bang, the mass of black gas broke through the arc and smashed into the cultivator's back like a meteor. My fellow cultivator, help me! When the cultivator saw that his magic treasure was easily destroyed, he panicked. However, it was obvious that this was not the first time it had been destroyed. Therefore, he turned his body nimbly and pounced on Zhu Qinghe, who was standing on his left. The mass of black gas was originally going to pounce on the cultivator, but because of the sudden change in the cultivator's body, it could not completely catch up with him. Instead, it made a slight turn and smashed into Zhu Qinghe. Damn it! Zhu Qinghe did not expect the cultivator to be so insidious. He did not even wait for the cultivator's name to be introduced, and he did not even give any warning. The cultivator brought the disaster to him, and he could not help but feel angry. However, when a mass of black gas was about to hit him, he could not care less. He shook his Taoist robe and raised his right hand from it. At this time, Zhu Qinghe's right hand had a faint golden color, which was particularly obvious in the dark forest. This faint golden color repelled the black things outside, and it could not be absorbed. Kill! Zhu Qinghe shouted in a low voice and swung his right arm straight down. A golden brilliance appeared from his hand like a sword, and it slashed directly at the mass of black gas that was coming toward him. A buzzing sound was heard as the sword light struck the black gas. It sounded like the buzzing of a hornet. The golden brilliance circulated at an extremely fast speed. It was as if the sword light was cutting the black gas with a saw. At the same time, the force of a mass of black gas bent the sword light. Zhu Qinghe's Taoist robe and hair were blown backward. His right arm trembled slightly, and his whole body was moving back inch by inch. Villa Head Chun, help me! Zhu Qinghe's Dharma power was rapidly depleted. When he saw the other Mo Zhao in the distance raised her head high again, he knew that things were not going well, and he immediately shouted, "Fellow cultivator Zhu, wait a moment." When Chun Yi heard Zhu Qinghe's cry for help, she waved her hand. After a ray of light flashed, a string of floating flower petals flashed in the air and fell on the mass of air like a fairy scattering flowers. When the petals touched the mass of black gas, all the petals turned into rotating flying swords, stabbing into the mass of black gas from all directions. Boom, boom, boom. There was another burst of noise. After the roaring noise subsided, there was a soft poof sound. First, it came from Zhu Qinghe's sword light. Then, the air mass seemed to be pierced everywhere. Pa 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 pa, sounds were incessant. At the same time, the black things that had condensed into black clumps once again flew out in all directions. Not only did they attack Zhu Qinghe and Chun Yi, but they also attacked the cultivator who had lured the source of the trouble to the side. Go! Zhu Qinghe and others roared, and the flying swords in their hands were waved again. The flying swords turned into stars and stabbed on the black balls. These black balls were much easier to deal with in the mass of black gas. After the sword light passed, they turned into black fog and scattered in the air of the black forest. Zhu Qinghe scanned the fleeing cultivator with his divine sense. The cultivator didn't even look back. With a wave of his sleeve, a faint green brilliance spread out. A wooden stick flashed and scattered the black balls. His figure continued to fly behind Zhu Qinghe and the others, as if he didn't care about the situation Zhu Qinghe and the others were in. Zhu Qinghe was furious. He had thought of this long ago, but he was afraid that the secret path would be exposed, so he had no choice but to come out and help. At this time, he was with Chun Yi and others. They were too big of a target, and they could not be compared with the fleeing cultivator. They would definitely be chased by Mo Zhao. Villa Master Chun, fellow cultivator Chong, fellow cultivator Xie. Zhu Qinghe did not think too much and said, "Since we have met Mo Zhao, it is a chance. We are confident that we can defeat him." Well said. Chun-Yi squinted her eyes when she saw Mo Zhao. She knew that Mo Zhao was full of treasures. Usually, Mo Zhao would hide in the depths of the Black Forest, and she would not dare to enter. How could she not be happy when Mo Zhao delivered himself to her? "I will team up with fellow cultivator Chong." Chun-Yi shouted and flew forward. She waved her hands, and clusters of flowers flew out. The flowers were rainbows formed by the sword light. Okay, Chang Yefeng, who was not far away from Chun-Yi, was already on guard. When he heard Chun-Yi's words, he did not say anything. He coordinated with Chun-Yi's angle, and a huge sword in his hand, which was more than 10 feet long and half a foot wide, slashed through the air. It was like a door plank and slashed toward Mo Zhao, who was closest to them. "I am coming too," Xie Zhiqin shouted and flew up with Zhu Qinghe. A flying sword flew out from his hand like a meteor and pierced the right eye of the other Mo Zhao. Roar! The two Mo Zhao were angry. The Mo Zhao that had been accumulating power flapped its wings and opened its mouth to spit out a cloud of black gas toward Chen Yi. The other Mo Zhao opened its mouth and spat out two clouds of black venom, which turned into sharp arrows toward the flying sword that was coming toward them. Don't take it head-on. Zhu Qinghe quickly reminded Xie Zhiqian when he saw that the flying sword was close to the venom. Fellow cultivator Zhu, please know that I's flying sword has. Xie Zhiqian did not take it seriously. He smiled and was about to explain when he heard a sizzling sound. Xie Zhiqian was shocked when he saw that the Mo Zhao's venom had eroded the brilliance around the flying sword. The brilliance of the flying sword had become much dimmer. Keep! Xie Zhiqian did not dare to be careless. He recited the sword formula and retrieved the flying sword. He scanned it with his divine thought and saw that the 3-inch-long flying sword was covered with black spots. It looked like a rusty iron sword. Fellow cultivator Xie, the Mo Zhao's venom is mixed with the black sand in the black forest. It is extraordinary. Zhu Qinghe smiled bitterly. It is the nemesis of my flying sword. If it were not for the fact that the Mo Zhao could not spit out too much venom, we would have to run away. As Zhu Qinghe spoke, two clouds of brilliance flew out from his hand and blocked in front of him and Xie Zhiqian. The brilliance was slowly annihilated by the Mo Zhao's venom. However, due to the brilliance, the venom was completely consumed. Quick! Mo Zhao seems to be trying to escape. Zhu Qinghe was about to talk to Xie Zhiqian when he scanned the area with his divine thought. As expected, Mo Zhao, who had spat out the venom earlier, saw that both the venom and the air mass were ineffective. Moreover, there were 4 powerful cultivators in front of him. He quickly flapped his wings and turned his body nimbly as if he was about to fly away. Chapter 1996. Zhu Qinghe had noticed it, and Chen Yi was even more aware of it. Her flying swords had already landed on Mo Zhao's body. The flying swords created a series of sparks on Mo Zhao's black body, but they could not hurt Mo Zhao at all. Go! Chen Yi could not allow the fatty meat in her mouth to escape. She rubbed her hands, and more peanuts flew out. Moreover, Chen Yi opened her mouth and spat out a cloud of pink mist. It suddenly expanded in the air and turned into a light veil. It covered Mo Zhao from top to bottom. Mo Zhao flapped his wings and flew away. However, as soon as he cast out the light muslin, a strong restrictive force was generated and firmly restrained them. It was as if a huge hand had grabbed them. Roar! Mo Zhao was furious. He tried his best to twist his body. His 2 fin-like tails were suddenly lifted up and drew 2 black shadows in the air. He almost swept the black wood that Xiao Hua was climbing and hit the light veil's magical weapon from the side. Puff, puff! 2 soft sounds rang out as the 2 hammers smashed into the veil. The light on the veil immediately dimmed, and Chen Yi's face flushed red. Don't worry, Villa Master Chen. I will help you. Zhu Qinghe smiled bitterly in his heart. Chen Yi was too greedy. Not only did she not wait for him to take out his Dharma treasure, but she also wanted to trap the 2 Mo Zhao. That was why she was hit by the powerful force of the Mo Zhao. However, the moment Zhu Qinghe activated the 3 Dharma treasures in his storage bag, Mo Zhao did not fly away. Instead, he dived into the ground and disappeared into the dark ground in a flash of light as he dived into the ground. Earth escape. Xiao Hua was stunned. Go after him. Chen Yi waved her hand, and the pink veil fell into her hand. She shouted softly, and the colorful light around her body flashed. It seemed that she was going to chase after Mo Zhao. Villa Master Chen. Zhu Qinghe whispered. The 5 elements escape skill is useless in Mo Zhao Black Forest. Alas, Chen Yi suddenly came to an understanding when she heard this, and she slapped herself on the forehead and laughed bitterly. I was in a hurry and forgot about this matter. Immediately after, the 5-colored brilliance around Chen Yi gradually disappeared, revealing Chun Yi's embarrassed and angry expression. Ahem. Zhu Qinghe coughed and said, "Even if Villa Master Chun knows the rare 5 elements escape skill, I'm afraid that he is no match for Mo Zhao, who is born with the earth escape skill. We are not fated to fight Mo Zhao today." Manor Lord Chun, you don't have to regret it. Chang Yefeng held the giant sword in his hand and said with a smile, Mo Zhao is rarely captured in the Black Forest because it can escape, unless you use the talisman that condenses the ground into toughness at the very beginning. Who would have prepared for Mo Zhao's sudden appearance? Xie Zhiqian smiled bitterly. At this point, everyone thought of the cultivator who lured Mo Zhao here and looked in the direction that the cultivator had fled. Unfortunately, other than the pitch-black sky and the branches of the black tree, where were the figures of cultivators? AI, let's go. Zhu Qinghe raised his head to look at Xiaohua and said, "Just treat it as being a good person this time. If I see this cultivator next time, I will definitely kill him without saying anything." Chun Yi said angrily. However, before she could finish her words, a familiar voice came from afar. "Fellow cultivator, help me ah?" Xiaohua was stunned. Wasn't that the cultivator who had escaped just now? This guy dares to come back? Xiaohua was extremely surprised. He had never thought that there would be such a shameless cultivator in the world. However, before Xiaohua could speak or look at the expressions of Chun Yi and the others, Zhu Qinghe's countenance instantly went ghastly pale. He slapped his hand and withdrew 4 jade slips from his storage pouch, and his divine sense swiftly wrote something on them. After that, he waved his hand, and the jade slips flew towards Chun Yi and the others, and he cried out, "Fellow Taoists, this is the place we're heading to. If any fellow Taoist escapes this calamity, then you can meet up here. Everyone, please take care of yourselves." After that, Zhu Qinghe took the lead and flew toward the place where Mo Zhao had disappeared. Zhu Qinghe was very fast, but Chun Yi and Chang Yefeng were not slow either. The two of them also scanned the distance with their divine senses, and an incredulous expression appeared on their faces. Before Zhu Qinghe could throw the jade slip to them, they had already flown into the air, grabbed the jade slip with their hands, and put it into their storage bags without even looking at it. Then, they turned into streaks of light, disregarding the dangers of ink shadow Black Forest, and left. Xiaohua took the jade slips and immediately released his Buddhist thought. However, before his Buddhist thought could reach far, a suffocating feeling came from afar. It was like the momentum of 10,000 horses galloping in the air. Xiaohua trembled. He knew that there must be a change in the Mo Zhao Black Forest. When he released his Buddhist thought for more than 10 miles, he saw that there seemed to be a huge wave in the Black Forest. The black sand was lifted high. Was it more than 10 feet high? Moreover, under the waves of the black sand, many spirit beasts and even spirit birds, and some cultivators were fleeing in panic. While Xiaohua was watching, 2 cultivators in the late stage of foundation establishment were swallowed by the black sand in the blink of an eye because their flying speed was not fast enough. Moreover, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth in the waves of the black sand was extremely chaotic. Xiaohua's Buddhist thought could not penetrate it, so he could not see whether the cultivators were dead or alive. The black sand moved very fast, as if following the flow of the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. It rushed several miles in an instant. At this time, the panicked Xie Zhiqian released his divine thought and found the abnormality. Mo Zhao, why did I encounter something that would not happen in tens of thousands of years? After saying that, he did not even greet Xiaohua. His figure followed Chun Yi and the others and chased after them. Xiaohua did not dare to be negligent. His figure also swept up, but he still flew very low, following behind Xie Zhiqian. He flew while observing Mo Zhao. The ink storm was like an ocean wave, surging forward violently. Wherever it went, everything in the Black Forest would be engulfed. Moreover, the ink storm was like a hurricane, stirring up all the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. All the withered branches and leaves in the black forest were swept up high into the sky. Xiaohua observed for a moment and had a plan in his heart. Although Mo Zhao was powerful, his speed was still slower than his bright thunder escape. If he used all his strength, escaping would not be a problem. However, Chun Yi and the others were in front of him. If he ran too fast, it was inevitable that he would be discovered. Therefore, Xiaohua thought for a moment, and his direction was slightly slanted, flying in another direction. Damn it, the world is really strange. A small foundation establishment cultivator actually ran to the inner layer of the black forest. Are you not afraid of being eaten by Mo Zhao? A voice sounded from above Xiao Hua's head. Needless to say, it was the cultivator who lured Mo Zhao here. Xiao Hua did not pay much attention to him. He only turned his head slightly and saw that it was a short and fat gold core cultivator. His face was shriveled and flat, like a rotten persimmon. Moreover, his eyes were extremely small and were embedded in the persimmon, as if they could not be seen. Give me your storage pouch. I will give you a ride. The cultivator looked at Xiao Hua and sneered. With your flying speed, you will be swallowed by Mo Zhao sooner or later. Not only will your true origin be eroded, your storage pouch will also be destroyed. I will show you kindness and give you a ride. If you are fated to escape, it is better than your cultivation being crippled and becoming an ordinary person. Instead of letting others benefit from this storage pouch, why not let me benefit from it? He, Xiao Hua, roughly understood and sneered. That is my business. It has nothing to do with you. Even if I throw my storage pouch here and let other cultivators benefit, I will not give it to a scoundrel who wants to take advantage of the situation. When the cultivator heard this, not only was he not angry, but he laughed instead. Rotten wood can't be carved. You don't understand shit. Didn't I just lead Mo Zhao to your teacher's place? Think with your ass. If your teacher did not fight with Mo Zhao, you would have encountered Mo Zhao long ago, wouldn't you? Didn't you die in Mo Zhao long ago? How can you still talk to me here? Seeing such a shameless cultivator, Xiao Hua sighed inwardly and ignored him. His body tilted and flew in another direction. Why are you flying there? You can only escape by flying straight. The short and fat cultivator said curiously. Then he swept back with his divine thought and rolled his bean-sized eyes. He rubbed his hands and threw a spell at Xiao Hua. At the same time, his other hand grabbed at the void, trying to scare away the storage pouch in Xiao Hua's eyes. You really don't want to live anymore. Xiao Hua was not as panicked as the short and fat cultivator imagined, nor was he flying around absent-mindedly. His Buddhist sense saw that the cultivator was actually trying to kill him behind his back without a trace of the demeanor of a senior, and he could not help but be furious. His body suddenly stopped in midair, and he waved his hand, using the earth condensation technique. Immediately, an oppressive force swarmed from all around the cultivator, squeezing the cultivator tightly. Oh, young man, your temper is not small. The cultivator was not afraid of Xiao Hua's spell at all, and only urged the magic power in his hand. He believed that Xiao Hua's magic power was definitely not as deep as his, and definitely not as fast as his spell. However, the instant the cultivator's great confinement art smashed onto Xiao Hua, a burst of brilliant light flickered all over Xiao Hua's body. It was precisely the activation of the protective brilliance. Moreover, just outside the brilliance, a layer of earth-yellow armor suddenly formed. Furthermore, Xiao Hua's figure suddenly shot up as fast as a messaging talisman. The great confinement technique only smashed into Xiao Hua's lower body, clearly hitting nothing but air. Protective brilliance. The cultivator was stunned, and a bad feeling emerged in his heart. He hurriedly shook his two arms outwards, as if he also wanted to urge the protective brilliance to break free from Xiao Hua's earth condensation technique. Unexpectedly, at this moment, the cultivator suddenly felt a sharp pain in his mind, as if an awl had pierced into his brain. His divine thought involuntarily contracted, and the magic power in his body also went out of control at the same time. Therefore, the cultivator could not help but cry out, "Oh!" His two hands tried to support his head. Chapter 1997. Haha. Xiao Hua sneered. The earth condensation technique had already hit the cultivator. The surrounding earth attribute heaven and earth spiritual qi swarmed over, binding the cultivator tightly. Xiao Hua's figure swept towards the cultivator again. He reached out and pulled down 2 huge storage bags from the waist of the cultivator, who fell from the air. He turned around and was about to escape. At this moment, Xiao Hua's gaze swept over and saw a green silk ribbon on the cultivator's neck. At this moment, the cultivator was panicking. The protective brilliance around his body flickered as soon as it was suppressed. Xiao Hua's heart stirred. He reached out and pulled out the green silk ribbon. On the green silk ribbon, there was a doll-like doll tied to it. That doll was only the size of a thumb. Its entire body was faintly green. A layer of faintly discernible green seal text appeared from time to time. It seemed to be floating on the outer layer, but also seemed to be hidden inside the doll. Looking at the doll again, its features were clear. Its eyes were tightly closed, and there was a trace of sadness at the corner of its mouth. It seemed to be full of sorrow. Sorcerer puppet? Xiao Hua was stunned. His eyes almost shrank. He almost didn't dare to believe his eyes. However, even if he saw the green seal text, he still didn't dare to believe it. After all, sorcerer puppets were legendary ancient objects. He had only seen them in Huang Yi's imprint. He couldn't be sure. Therefore, Xiao Hua didn't even think and hid the doll in his arms. He didn't even look at the cultivator, who fell on the ground. He turned around and fled. The eyes of the cultivator, who fell on the ground, were filled with regret, not only for provoking Xiao Hua, but also for his carelessness. He panicked because of his escape. In fact, his cultivation wasn't weaker than Xiao Hua's. It was only because of his carelessness that he felt that dealing with a baby like Xiao Hua didn't require much effort. But he really didn't expect Xiao Hua to have soul stab and earth condensation technique. He didn't care about dealing with Xiao Hua, but Xiao Hua was serious. He used a secret technique right from the start. Who was stronger and who was weaker? Naturally, it was clear. However, the cultivator simply didn't have much time to regret, nor did he have much time to break through Xiao Hua's earth condensation technique. The ink storm came charging over like it was covering the sky and covering the earth. Countless ink sand hit the cultivator's meridians like it was real, hitting the true essence within the meridians and the golden core that was the source of the true essence within the dantian. The golden core was originally a faint yellow color, and it revolved in his dantian. However, when a large amount of ink entered the golden core, the outer layer of the golden core was instantly dyed black. Soon after, a layer of fine black powder appeared on the surface of the golden core. When the black powder came into contact with the spirit qi, it immediately formed bubbles. The bubbles quickly burst, layer after layer. As the bubbles burst, the golden core shrank slightly. The cultivator was still struggling with all his might, but after being annihilated by the ink storm, his breath and surroundings were completely filled with the tyrannical ink sand. He was unable to extract the spiritual qi of heaven and earth, and could only use his Jindan to activate his mana. But at this moment, his Jindan had also been invaded by the ink sand. Not to mention that the vital essence in his meridians had been completely blocked by the ink sand, unable to activate his mana. Even if his meridians were intact, his Jindan would not be able to provide vital essence. As a result, the cultivator's face was deathly pale, and he no longer wanted to struggle. However, at this moment, the cultivator's body loosened. Xiao Hua's earth condensation technique was still unable to resist the might of the ink storm, and it collapsed under the might of heaven and earth. The cultivator suddenly rejoiced, and a trace of hope rose in his heart. However, before he could crawl up from the ground, a wind howled, and a piece of black wood as thick as a duck's egg flew through the hurricane, striking the cultivator's temple. The cultivator faintly glanced to the side, not panicking in the slightest. He waved his left hand, and an extremely simple object controlling technique was used, wanting to knock the black wood away. However, he extended his hand, but his mana was gone. His technique was nothing more than a superficial struggle. With a bang, that blackwood struck the cultivator's temple, and a wisp of dark red blood flowed down from the cultivator's forehead. The cultivator's body swayed twice, and he fell to the ground, never to crawl up again. A golden core cultivator was killed by a blackwood just like that. Xiao Hua took the other party's doll and threw the two huge storage bags into the space. His figure no longer hesitated, and he flew forward slightly crookedly. However, after flying for half a cup of tea's time, Xiao Hua felt that something was wrong. The amount of ink sand in the air was increasing, and with the agitation of the heaven and earth spiritual qi, the ink sand seemed to be affected. Moreover, as Xiao Hua flew, the surrounding blackwood became thicker, and from time to time, there were some black vines bearing their fangs and brandishing their claws from the blackwood, as if to block Xiao Hua. This is bad. Xiao Hua suddenly realized that he was flying in the wrong direction again. The place where Chun Yi flew to should be outside of the ink cloud black forest, and in order to avoid their eyes and ears, he diverted. Wasn't he flying to the middle of the ink cloud black forest? However, seeing that the ink cloud black forest was becoming more and more violent and had the power to sweep everything away, Xiao Hua wanted to fly in front of the ink cloud black forest again. My goodness, what should I do now? Xiao Hua's heart trembled slightly. On one hand, he was desperately trying to escape into the depths of the ink cloud black forest, and on the other hand, his mind was spinning like a windmill, trying to find a way to escape. However, after thinking for a long time, Xiao Hua still could not think of a way to escape from the ink cloud black forest, even though Mo Bao's momentum and speed were increasing exponentially. Damn it, am I going to be buried in the ink cloud black forest? Xiao Hua sighed in his heart, but at this moment, a ray of light flashed in his heart. Ink cloud? That's right. Where did the ink cloud black forest go? I have been in the ink cloud black forest for a long time, but why haven't I seen a single ink cloud black forest? If there is no ink cloud black forest, will it still be a dangerous place? Xiao Hua came to his senses and lowered his head to look at the pitch-black ground. Ha ha! They are all underground. Xiao Hua's divine sense could not reach far. So when he used his Buddhist awareness to check, he really saw that under the pitch-black ground, there were many ink cloud black forests that were like hibernating snakes. They curled up into a coil and wrapped themselves with their fleshy wings. Well, the ground can block divine sense, so it should be able to block most of the ink cloud black forest. Since the ink cloud black forest has spread its fleshy wings, the fleshy wings should be able to block a part of the ink cloud black forest. As for the remaining ink cloud black forest, the ink cloud black forest should not be afraid of it. Xiao Hua understood, and his heart immediately calmed down. He formed a seal with his hands and used the earth escape technique. His body escaped into the pitch-black ground. However, in just a moment, Xiao Hua flew out from the ground again and said with a smile, I am stupid. The ink cloud black forest is extremely dangerous. Even a gold core stage cultivator has to be careful in fear of being attacked by the ink cloud black forest or other ferocious creatures. Now, because of the ink cloud black forest, all the ferocious creatures have escaped. Before the ink cloud black forest, who would dare not to escape? Isn't this a good time for me to go deep into the ink cloud black forest? If we don't go in now, what are we waiting for? Chapter 1998. Immediately, Xiao Hua took out the maze again and put on his body. His body stuck close to the ground and flew towards the depths of the black forest. Of course, Xiao Hua was also prepared. The 100 talismans in the rabbit array were already in his hand. He was only waiting for the time when he couldn't escape. Then he would go deep into the ground and lay out the array. Xiao Hua's bright thunder escape was indeed powerful. He quickly rushed in front of Mo Bao like a warrior surfing the waves, standing on top of the waves. Those hiding under the ground were not only Mo Zhao and other monsters, but also Gold Core Stage and Nascent Soul Stage cultivators. These cultivators left their spirit sense outside to observe Mo Bao's whereabouts. At this time, They actually saw Xiao Hua's figure that was like a meteor. They couldn't help but be shocked. None of them didn't want to see Xiao Hua's true face. Unfortunately, their spirit sense didn't dare to be too far away. Moreover, Xiao Hua's maze also blocked their spirit sense. Even if they wanted to see, they couldn't. Which expert is this? He actually dares to fly like this in the M.O. Zhao Black Forest, and his flying speed is so fast. The cultivators started to guess. Some were spirit-severing stage cultivators, some were nascent soul stage cultivators, and some even guessed that it was the Imperial Thunder sect. However, they never thought that under the maze, it was just a small Imperial Thunder sect and a small Foundation establishment stage cultivator in the myriad Thunder Valley. Buzz, it seemed to be the sound of mountains shaking and the earth quaking, coming from the front of Xiao Hua's head. Xiao Hua tried his best to probe out with his Buddhist consciousness, but he could not find any clues. However, Xiao Hua understood in his heart that the ink cloud Black Forest must have produced an ink storm in the depths of the forest and was pushing out in all directions. Therefore, he didn't dare to delay any longer. He formed a seal and drilled into the ground. Moreover, he used all his spirit sense to go as deep as possible. After passing by dozens of M.O. Zhao of different sizes, Xiao Hua finally felt a huge force starting to support him. He knew that he had almost reached the deepest part of the Earth escape, so he didn't waste any more spirit sense to go down. Instead, he hurriedly threw out the 100 talismans to lay out the rabbit array. Just after Xiao Hua threw out most of the talismans, a feeling of black clouds pressing down on the city rushed over from above. Good. It's still so powerful, even though it's so far from the ground. Xiao Hua was flabbergasted. He activated the magic power in his hand and waved it continuously. Finally, as the ink sand fell one after another, he grabbed his hand. The rabbit spell formation was activated one after another and blocked the oppressive aura. However, the formation was only able to block the majority of the ink sand. There was still an extremely small amount of ink sand that was able to penetrate through the gaps in the formation. It was sucked onto Xiao Hua's body. However, at this moment, the ink sand was not much worse than the ink sand that Xiao Hua had encountered at the edge of the ink cloud Black Forest. After entering his meridians, it was absorbed by the Yao milk. Although Xiao Hua did not release his Buddhist consciousness from the magic circle, he could see the flickering brilliance above the magic circle. It seemed like a lonely lamp in the waves that wanted to say something, but stopped on second thought. Naturally, he also knew the brutality of the ink violence on the ground. Thus, he sighed and clapped his hand, taking out the doll that looked like a wizard puppet. Although it looks the same as the sorcerer puppet, I can't be sure. Xiao Hua stared at the doll and thought to himself, but this doll is obviously written in green seal script. It must be related to witchcraft. However, that cultivator is only at the peak of the early stage of the Golden Core Realm. He has not reached the middle stage of the Golden Core Realm. Where did he get the sorcerer puppet? Unfortunately, that cultivator was submerged by the ink violence. Now, I don't know whether he is dead or alive. Humph, such a shameless cultivator. He won't even let go of a small Foundation establishment cultivator like me. What's the use of keeping him alive in this world? Xiao Hua immediately curled his lips and placed the sorcerer puppet aside. Then he took out the 2 storage pouches that he had taken from that cultivator from the space. When he opened the storage pouches to take a look, he could not help but be stunned. There were a lot of things in the bag of holding, but there were no spirit stones, no medicinal pills, and no spirit herbs. There were only a lot of broken jade slips, some worn-out magic tools, magic treasures, and some inexplicable things. I understand. Xiao Hua slapped his forehead and said with a smile, "This guy is the same as the cultivator abandoned by the heavens." He came to the ink cloud Black Forest to look for cultivation techniques or magic treasure remains. It's just that this guy is really amazing. He actually collected so many things. Presumably, that sorcerer puppet was also found by him in the ink cloud Black Forest. Since that cultivator said that all storage pouches cannot escape the ink violence, then the ink sand must be able to corrode storage pouches. These things cannot be left in storage pouches. They must be exposed in the ink cloud black forest. Moreover, the ink sand will attack at any time. It is impossible for all magic tools and magic treasures to be intact. However, this cultivator is self-taught. He hid the sorcerer puppet close to his body. Xiao Hua glanced at the doll again and said with a smile, "It's just a pity that he doesn't know the method to refine the sorcerer puppet. It is useless for him to keep it. On the contrary, it is giving this young master a life." Xiao Hua had seen the introduction and method to refine the sorcerer puppet from Huang Yi's ghost cultivation inheritance. He knew that this sorcerer puppet was an object refined by ancient witchcraft. It was incomparably miraculous. After refining it, it could be kept close to the body and could die once in place of the cultivator. As for why it was like this, and how it was refined in this day and age where witchcraft had long been lost, who would know? Even ghost cultivators with hundreds of thousands or millions of years of inheritance did not know. 2 white bones. Xiao Hua scanned the area with his divine sense, and he saw 2 extremely long and thick white bones among the pile of junk. Xiao Hua clapped his hands and took out the white bones from his storage pouch. He held them in his hands and observed them carefully. The white bones were extremely thick. Xiao Hua's 2 hands could not close together. Moreover, the white bones were extremely long. Xiao Hua was already tall and thin, but the white bones were actually more than twice as tall as him. Good heavens, these 2 white bones are actually compatible with the giant head in the space. Xiao Hua's heart stirred. The true samadhi fire in his hands was ignited and burned the 2 white bones. As Xiao Hua expected, not long after, strings of tadpole-like green seal characters emerged from the white bones. They floated in the air for a moment, and then flew into the space with Xiao Hua's mind. They slowly revolved around reverse light. Thus, pieces of green seal characters and pictures were reflected in Xiao Hua's mind. After the time of 2 meals, the green seal characters gradually dimmed and disappeared. Everything was stored in Xiao Hua's mind. Alas, even with the ghost cultivator's inheritance, this young master still does not understand these green seal characters. Xiao Hua sighed. Moreover, according to the ghost cultivator's inheritance, this talisman curse technique came from the immemorial witchcraft. It's just that it's much more shallow. I wonder when this young master will be able to understand these green seal characters. Thinking of the green seal characters, Xiao Hua remembered the Confucian words on the tortoise shell. Those were the inscriptions on the armor, which also originated from the immemorial era. However, they were used by Confucian cultivators to record cultivation techniques. Looking at the vivid green seal characters, Xiao Hua sighed again. He swept his mind again, and the 2 white bones flew into the space. Sure enough, once the white bones entered the space, ka-cha-cha, sounds of thunder could be heard. The white bones automatically flew to the bottom of the previous white bones and lay down. They looked just like the calf bones of a giant. This young master understands now. Seeing the invisible connection between the white bones and the green lightning wrapped around the white bones, Xiao Hua smiled. This is the skeleton of an immemorial celestial. It's even related to lightning. If we can gather the skeleton of this celestial, maybe something fun will happen. As for what would be fun, Xiao Hua scratched his head and couldn't think of anything. Below the white bones, the lightning beast cub seemed to still be in a deep slumber. The lightning ball on the white bones also wrapped around it. Moreover, from time to time, lightning would be born from the white clouds in the air, striking the lightning beast cub. No matter what, this little cub can live. Xiao Hua smiled and looked at the poison beauty retaining grass. In this space, the beast poison seemed to have stopped, and the beauty retaining grass had a strong vitality. Although Xiao Hua didn't expel the poison from the beauty retaining grass, the originally dead beauty retaining grass regained its vitality at this time. Moreover, it was fighting against the beast poison step by step. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't have time now, Xiao Hua wouldn't dare to take the beauty retaining grass out of the space. He was afraid that the beast poison would wreak havoc again. If he didn't have the confidence to expel the poison, Xiao Hua would definitely take the beauty-retaining grass out of the space and see if he could use a secret method to save the beauty-retaining grass. Thinking about it, which female cultivator wouldn't like a spiritual grass that could make a person stay young forever? Thinking about it again, even the burial flower manor only had 4 stalks. If he planted them in the space, then the spirit stones, TSK, it wouldn't be any worse than a jade mine. Thinking about it, Xiaohua unconsciously licked his dry lips. It's better not to think too much. Xiaohua hurriedly pulled his consciousness out of the space and flipped through the ghost cultivator's inheritance. He carefully looked at the content of the shaman puppet and also looked at the details of the refining method of the shaman puppet. Oh, so this shaman puppet isn't omnipotent. The first time Xiaohua looked at it, he didn't look at it carefully. Now that he looked at it word by word, he understood some deeper things. The power of the shaman puppet is related to the cultivation of the person refining it. It should be able to resist the attack of a cultivator who is 1 level higher than that. If there is more, the shaman puppet can't replace it. And there's also the environment used, the magic tool used to kill it, and so on. The more Xiaohua looked, the smaller the surprise in his heart. But thinking about it, if the shaman puppet had such great power, it could directly replace the death of a cultivator. If the almighty cultivator refined a few more shaman puppets, then wouldn't they be able to rest easy? Even if it was lightning tribulation, they wouldn't have to be afraid. Lightning tribulation, magic tools that aren't part of the 5 elements. They can't be replaced by shaman puppets. Xiaohua looked and laughed. The requirements are getting more and more stringent. Oh, or magic tools that aren't part of the 5 elements. Xiaohua suddenly paused and looked forward. His eyes turned, and he seemed to understand something. He thought to himself, in this inheritance, it only talks about magic tools. It doesn't talk about magic treasures or spirit treasures. It's probably because in ancient times, there were only magic tools. But after it reached the Tao sect, it started to divide them into different categories and increase the number of magic tools. However, I wonder what are magic tools that are part of the 5 elements? That's right, my great wisdom heavy sword. Isn't it like this? Xiaohua suddenly came to a realization. Chapter 1999. When he thought about how he'd finally found the origin of the great wisdom sword, Xiaohua couldn't help but be overjoyed. He disregarded the refining of the shaman puppet and carefully looked through the inheritance of the ghost cultivators. After an hour, Xiaohua frowned and flicked his hand, taking out the great wisdom sword. The ghost cultivator's inheritance didn't say too much about magic tools that aren't part of the 5 elements. It only vaguely pointed out a few places. Xiaohua was a bit distressed. I only know that this kind of magic tool can't be refined using ordinary refining methods. It can't be contaminated with items of the 5 elements. Although the towering flame can be used to refine tools, it clearly belongs to the fire of the 5 elements. It definitely can't be used to refine the great wisdom sword. The true samadhi fire is too gentle and isn't suitable for refining tools. Could it be that I have to use that spiritual fire? But thinking about how using just a bit of spiritual fire would exhaust half of his cultivation, Xiaohua immediately became dejected. Damn it, if I want to refine the great wisdom sword, I'm afraid I'll have to use 10 times, or even 100 times my current cultivation. I really don't know when I'll be able to refine it. Moreover, what kind of magic tool can I refine with the great wisdom sword? Xiaohua's mind was active again. The great wisdom sword was originally a sword embryo. Presumably, it will be refined into a sword. But it can't be controlled by divine sense, so how can it fly? It can only be held in the hand. If it's held in the hand, how can it be used? I don't know any sword techniques that can be held in the hand. Usually, I only use it as a staff. After all, there's still a heavenly staff technique in my memories. Thinking here, Xiaohua raised his brows again, seeming to have thought of something. He had no choice but to dig out the ghost cultivator's inheritance again. There was no other reason. The ghost cultivator's inheritance was really too much. It wasn't Xiaohua's own memories. When he used it, he could only find it on the spot. After a moment, a trace of a smile appeared on Xiaohua's face. He opened his eyes and said with a smile, "5 elements wishful heavenly staff. Isn't this the weapon you prepared for me?" It turned out that in the ghost cultivator's inheritance, there was a staff-shaped magic tool used by immemorial celestials. Its size could be controlled by the heart, and it didn't belong to the 5 elements. Moreover, it was shockingly heavy. Wasn't this the staff that Xiaohua was thinking? It's a pity that the inheritance only recorded this kind of magic weapon. It didn't record how to refine it or what materials were used to refine it. Xiaohua scratched his chin with his index finger and said with a smile, "Presumably, with the spiritual bodies of ghosts, they're also afraid of this 5 elements wishful heaven cudgel. Even if they knew, they wouldn't dare to record it down. Forget it. A celestial being's magical artifact isn't something I've seen before. Who knows, it might even be a primordial forging technique. That's something that only almighty beings possess. I'd better not covet it." Thinking about this, Xiaohua was somewhat happy and somewhat melancholy as he put away the Great Wisdom Sword. With a wave of his hand, the Great Wisdom Sword was held in his hand. Immediately, he closed his eyes and carefully went through the method of refining the Great Wisdom Sword. Then he used his thumb to point at the mark of the Great Wisdom eye on his forehead and shouted, "Open." As Xiaohua spat out the needle, the mark of the Great Wisdom eye between his eyebrows gradually appeared. After waiting for a moment, Xiaohua closed his eyes and urged the soul cultivation technique. The soul strands extended out from the Great Wisdom eye. Thread by thread, circle by circle, they wrapped around the Great Wisdom Sword according to the method of refining the Great Wisdom Sword. Following the strange, winding method of the soul strands, the green seal characters on the Great Wisdom Sword began to slowly appear. One by one, they lit up as if Xiaohua was lighting them up one after another. When all the green seal characters lit up, Xiaohua's soul strands began to fling out again. Each strand of soul strands touched a green seal character. Xiaohua only felt the place where his soul strands were connected to tremble. For some reason, there was an indescribable feeling of comfort, or perhaps it was a strange feeling. It was as if he had somewhat understood the meaning of the green seal characters. But if he were to say it out loud, it would be extremely difficult. Understand, Xiaohua was overjoyed. So this is how the green seal characters are practiced. It's definitely not the Great Wisdom Sword or the Great Wisdom Sword. The green seal characters themselves have the ability to shock the heavens and make ghosts and gods weep. So that's how it is. While thinking, Xiaohua carefully pulled out his soul strand again. One by one, he touched all the green seal characters. However, what surprised him was that although there were many green seal characters, there were only 3 that could cause his soul to tremble. Could it be? Xiaohua, while arranging the green seal characters according to the records, secretly guessed. There are only 3 useful green seal characters, and the green seal characters are all formed by these 3 green seal characters? Or perhaps I can feel these 3 green seal characters, but I can't feel the others? Just as he was thinking about it, all of the green seal characters had finished assembling and were floating in the air, forming a slightly larger green seal character. It should be like this. Looking at this green seal character that was extremely similar to the other green seal characters, Xiaohua thought to himself. Then, without hesitation, he opened his mouth and spat a mouthful of essence blood on the green seal character. The green seal character suddenly emitted a brilliant golden light. Then, Xiaohua only felt a slight dizziness in his head. The green seal character returned to its faint green appearance and completely covered the shaman puppet. As the green seal text fell, the entire shaman puppet also emitted a green light, which disappeared in a flash. Although the shaman puppet's appearance didn't change, Xiaohua could clearly see that the shaman puppet's mouth was curled up, revealing a slight smile. Seeing this smile, Xiaohua's face also revealed a smile. The shaman puppet couldn't be used infinitely. Each shaman puppet could only be used 3 times. Since Xiao Hua succeeded in refining it and revealed a smiling face, it meant that the shaman puppet could still be used. The crying face from before must be the reason that cultivator didn't know how to refine it. And I wonder who that cultivator is. His storage bag isn't at his waist. Xiao Hua smiled and thought, presumably, everything in his storage bag has become the prey of others in the future. After refining the voodoo puppet, Xiao Hua also found a silk ribbon and hung the voodoo puppet in front of his neck, placing it together with the phoenix auspicious jade talisman. Then he slightly released his Buddhist consciousness to observe the Mo Bao outside the formation. Just as Xiao Hua expected, the Mo Bao outside the formation was still rampant and showed no signs of stopping. Fine, then I'll use this free time to cultivate more. Xiao Hua didn't regret it. What he lacked now was time. Wasn't it good to have free time? Immediately, Xiao Hua closed his eyes and comprehended the mysteries of the soul spike. That ghost cultivator's soul spike was indeed powerful. It directly pierced into the Naiwan Palace. It was definitely the nemesis of divine sense. Previously, when Xiao Hua killed the short and fat cultivator, he also didn't expect it to be so powerful. He even prepared the dream execution, true samadhi fire, and a few other moves. However, once the soul spike was used, it immediately showed a miraculous effect. All of the other moves were useless. Therefore, Xiao Hua very much liked this method that could restrain a Jindan cultivator's divine ability. That you're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.